The city skyline from Alex's penthouse apartment in Manhattan was a spectacle of captured stars, a forest of light and ambition. Below, the yellow cabs flowed like a river of gold, and in the polished reflection of the floor-to-ceiling windows, Alex could see the life that was, by all accounts, a masterpiece of success. The architectural awards on the minimalist shelf, the German sports car in the private garage, the career that was the envy of peers. Alex had everything. And yet, in the profound silence that fell after the last client email was sent, a silence punctuated only by the electric hum of the city that never sleeps, a familiar hollowness would arrive. It was a guest that never knocked, a quiet ache in the center of a life filled with noise. The phone would light up, a notification, a like, a market update, each one a tiny digital whisper promising connection, promising fulfillment, but delivering only a momentary distraction from the vast inner emptiness. Alex was prosperous, but not rich, successful, but not serene. This is the great paradox of our modern age. We are taught to chase, to acquire, to climb, to optimize. We build lives of incredible complexity and speed, biohacking our bodies and scheduling our leisure, all in the pursuit of more. We speak of raising our frequency, of vibrating at a higher level to attract success, to manifest wealth. But in our relentless effort to increase the frequency of our doing, we have neglected the frequency of our being. We are running faster and faster on a treadmill that goes nowhere, ending each day more exhausted, more disconnected, more spiritually famished than the last. We suffer from a quiet poverty of the soul, hidden behind a loud display of material wealth. But what if we have been tuning into the wrong broadcast all along? What if true frequency is not an energy we project outward to get what we want, but a quality of stillness we cultivate inward to appreciate what we have? What if infinite prosperity is not measured by the sum of our assets, but by the depth of our peace, a wealth that no market crash can erase, no thief can steal? There is an ancient path, a timeless wisdom that does not promise to give you everything you desire. Instead, it offers something far more powerful, the realization that you already have everything you truly need. It is a path that leads not to a destination, but to a different way of traveling. It is the path of awareness, the path of waking up, the path of the Buddha. In the popular spiritual marketplace of our time, the idea of frequency is a powerful and alluring one. We are told that we are broadcasting antennas, sending signals out into the cosmos, and that the universe, a faithful servant, rearranges itself to match the vibration we emit. To get the life we want, we must simply learn to vibrate at the correct frequency. There is a seductive empowerment in this narrative. It suggests we are the masters of our destiny, the composers of our own symphony. It offers a sense of control in a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable. But what if this metaphor, while born from a desire for agency, is subtly pointing us in the wrong direction? What if the constant effort to manage our vibration, to police our thoughts lest we attract negativity, becomes just another source of anxiety, another task on an endless to-do list for self-improvement? The wisdom of the Buddhist path invites us to consider a radical shift in perspective. It suggests that frequency is not a force we project, but a quality of mind we cultivate. It is not about the signal you send out, but about the clarity of the receiver, your own mind. Imagine your mind as a sophisticated radio. For many of us, this radio is perpetually tuned to a station of static. The signal is weak, filled with hiss, crackle, and the distracting noise of other interfering stations. This is the low frequency state. The noise is the ceaseless chatter of our inner critic, the relentless drumbeat of our desires, the painful feedback of our resentments and fears. From this state of inner noise, we try to broadcast our wishes to the universe, shouting over the static, hoping to be heard. We might experience moments of clarity, a few seconds of a beautiful melody, but soon the noise returns, and we are left feeling frustrated, wondering if we are not trying hard enough, not being positive enough. The Buddhist path suggests we stop trying to shout over the noise. Instead, it invites us to simply and patiently turn the tuning dial. The work is not external, but internal. The goal is not to change the song being played by the universe, but to adjust our own receiver so we can hear the music that is already playing, the profound and peaceful melody of reality itself, which is always present, right here, right now. So what constitutes this low frequency, this inner static? In the Buddhist understanding, it is not some mystical negative energy, but a very specific set of mental and emotional patterns known as the three poisons. These are the primary obscurations that cloud the natural clarity of the mind. The first poison is greed, or craving. In our language, we might call this the state of perpetual wanting. It is the gnawing feeling of not enough money, not enough love, not enough validation, not enough experiences. It is the engine of our consumer culture, the restless ghost that whispers, true happiness is just one more purchase, one more promotion, one more relationship away. A mind dominated by greed is a tense, agitated mind. It is constantly scanning the horizon for the next thing to acquire, incapable of resting in the present moment because the present is never enough. This is a frequency of deep dissatisfaction, a vibration of lack, no matter how much one possesses. The second poison is aversion, or hatred. This is the energy of pushing away. It manifests as anger when we are stuck in traffic, as irritation with a colleague's habits, as resentment for a past betrayal, as fear of future pain or loss. It is the voice that says, I don't like this. It shouldn't be this way. A mind dominated by aversion is a contracted, brittle mind. It builds walls to protect itself. It sees threats everywhere, and it lives in a state of conflict with reality. It is a tight, defensive frequency, one that experiences the world not as a space to explore, but as a field of potential dangers to be neutralized. It is exhausting to maintain, for it requires constant vigilance against the unfolding of life itself. The third, and most fundamental poison, is delusion, or ignorance. This is not a lack of intellectual knowledge, but a profound misperception of reality. It is the fog of confusion that prevents us from seeing things as they truly are. It is the foundational belief that permanent, lasting happiness can be found in things that are, by their very nature, impermanent. It is the mistaken identity of believing that our fleeting thoughts, our changing emotions, and our aging bodies constitute a solid, permanent me. This delusion is the soil from which both greed and aversion grow, because we are deluded into thinking there is a separate, solid self to protect and please. We engage in craving for what we think will enhance that self, and aversion to what we think will threaten it. This is the background static, the low, humming frequency of confusion that underlies all our other inner turmoil. A high frequency, then, in this ancient view, is not a supercharged state of positive thinking aimed at manifesting a sports car. It is simply the natural state of the mind when these three poisons are absent, or at least when they are recognized and not acted upon. A high-frequency mind is characterized not by frantic positivity, but by a spacious calm. In the place of greed, there is contentment, a deep sense of enough, which gives rise to generosity. In the place of aversion, there is acceptance and loving kindness, a gentle allowing of reality to be as it is, which gives rise to compassion. And in the place of delusion, there is wisdom, a clear seeing of the interconnected and impermanent nature of life. This high frequency is not something you have to create, build, or force. It is the mind's original nature. It is the clear sky that is always present behind the passing clouds of our greed, aversion, and delusion. The practice is not about manufacturing a sky, but simply allowing the clouds to drift by without clinging to them. There is a classic Zen story that illustrates this principle perfectly. A renowned university professor, a man full of knowledge and theories about spirituality, journeyed to visit a wise old Zen master. Upon arriving, he immediately began to speak, sharing all his sophisticated ideas, his interpretations of ancient texts, his complex philosophical questions. He talked and talked, dominating the conversation. The Zen master listened patiently and then said, "Let us have some tea." She began to pour tea into the professor's cup. She filled it to the brim, and then she kept pouring. The hot tea overflowed, spilling onto the saucer and then onto the table. The professor, alarmed, shouted, "Stop! It is full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring, looked at him calmly and said, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you anything of wisdom unless you first empty your cup? Our minds are like that cup. They are filled to the brim with our plans, our worries, our beliefs, our desires, our ideas about how the world should be. This is our low frequency, the cluttered state of a full cup. The path to raising our frequency, therefore, is not about adding more things, more affirmations, more techniques, more knowledge. It is the courageous and liberating practice of emptying. It is the willingness to set down our cherished opinions, to let go of our relentless cravings, to release our bitter resentments. The goal is not to become a more powerful transmitter to the universe. The goal is to become an empty vessel, a clear and silent space, ready to receive the simple, profound truth of what is, right here, in this very moment. And so, as we begin to understand that frequency is an internal quality of mind, a measure of our inner clarity and peace, we must inevitably turn our questioning gaze upon the goal itself. If we are no longer seeking to attract things from the outside, then what? Our culture provides us with a very clear, if unspoken, definition of prosperity. It is a line on a graph that moves up and to the right. It is the accumulation of assets, the expansion of our financial portfolio, the steady acquisition of the symbols of success. It is the dream of a larger house, a faster car, a more exotic vacation. It is the security of a well-funded retirement plan and the ability to provide our children with every advantage. This is the gospel of modern wealth, a message broadcast from every billboard and every screen. We are taught that the path to happiness is paved with material gain, and that a rising net worth is the primary metric of a life well lived. And yet, we must ask the honest question, the one that surfaces in the quiet moments, late at night, when the distractions fade away. If this is true prosperity, why does it so often walk hand in hand with a profound sense of anxiety? Why do so many who have won the game of accumulation still feel like they are losing? Why does the feeling of enough remain so elusive, a horizon that recedes as we approach it? Perhaps it is because we have confused two very different things, pleasure and joy. Pleasure is a transaction. It is a temporary high that comes from an external stimulus, the taste of an expensive wine, the thrill of a new purchase, the validation of a compliment, the successful closing of a deal. These things are not inherently bad. They are part of the texture of life. But pleasure is, by its very nature, fleeting. It depends on conditions outside of ourselves, and as soon as the stimulus fades, the pleasure begins to wane. This creates a cycle of dependency. To feel that pleasure again, we must seek another stimulus, often needing a slightly stronger dose to achieve the same effect. This is the essence of the hedonic treadmill. We are running, often at great expense and effort, just to maintain the same level of fleeting satisfaction. This form of wealth is exhausting to maintain. It is a house built on sand, constantly needing to be repaired and reinforced against the changing tides of life. Joy, on the other hand, is not a transaction. In the Buddhist languages, words like piti or sukha point to something deeper. Joy is a state of being. It is an internal resource. It is the quiet, abiding sense of well-being that arises from a mind at peace. It does not depend on getting something new. It emerges from the spaciousness of a mind that is not constantly craving or resisting. It is the warmth that comes from an act of genuine kindness, the contentment that arises from watching a sunset without needing to photograph it, the deep satisfaction of simply breathing and knowing that in this moment, nothing is lacking. Unlike pleasure, joy is sustainable. It is a wellspring within us, and the more we draw from it, the more it seems to replenish itself. True prosperity, from this perspective, is not the endless and exhausting pursuit of external pleasures. It is the cultivation of reliable access to this deep inner reservoir of joy. It is building our home on the bedrock of inner peace. The Buddha spoke of a different kind of portfolio, a different kind of wealth that is immune to the fluctuations of the stock market and the decay of time. He called it Aryadhana, which can be translated as the treasure of the nobles or the wealth of the wise. This portfolio consists of 7 invaluable internal assets. The first is faith, or conviction. This is not blind belief in a dogma, but a deep, experiential trust in the path of wisdom and in our own innate capacity for goodness and clarity. It is the anchor of sanity in a confusing world. The second treasure is virtue. This is the profound wealth of a clear conscience, the peace of mind that comes from living in a way that intentionally causes no harm to ourselves or to others. It is the freedom from the inner poison of guilt, shame, and regret, a freedom that no amount of money can purchase. Guarding this virtue are the next 2 treasures, conscience and prudence. These are our inner moral guardians. Conscience is that innate sense of honor that makes us recoil from unwholesome actions. Prudence is the wise fear of the consequences of those actions. Together, they form an ethical immune system that protects our most valuable asset, our inner peace. The 5th treasure is learning. This is the richness of a mind that is open, curious, and dedicated to understanding the truth. It is not about accumulating facts, but about gaining insight into the nature of our own mind, understanding why we suffer, and learning how we can be free. The 6th treasure is generosity. Here lies a beautiful paradox. In a world that tells us wealth is in what we keep, this wisdom reveals that true prosperity is found in what we give away. Generosity is the direct antidote to the poison of greed. It breaks the spell of not enough and connects us to the joyful reality of interdependence. It is the wealth of a heart that is open and flowing, not a fist that is clenched and grasping. Finally, the 7th and most precious treasure is wisdom. This is the crown jewel of inner wealth. It is the direct, unshakable insight into the way things are, their impermanence, their interconnectedness, and the illusory nature of a separate, solid self. This wisdom is what cuts through the fog of delusion, liberating the mind from the roots of its suffering. These 7 treasures form the ultimate secure investment. They are a form of wealth that grows with use, that cannot be stolen, that we carry with us through all of life's changes, and that ultimately leads to a peace that is beyond all measure. This inner wealth is, at its core, freedom from fear. The pursuit of external prosperity is almost always shadowed by fear. The fear of losing what we have, the fear of not getting what we want, the fear of being seen as a failure if our material success wanes. Our identity becomes entangled with our bank balance, and so we live in a state of low-grade, chronic anxiety. The inner treasures of the wise dismantle these fears one by one. The wealth of virtue frees us from the fear of a troubled conscience. The wealth of generosity frees us from the fear of lack. The wealth of wisdom frees us from the fear of change, loss, and even death itself. True prosperity is not a big house, but a mind that is a fearless home. There is a story that illuminates this contrast with perfect clarity. A great king, ruler of a vast and wealthy kingdom, once came to visit the Buddha. The king was powerful, respected, and possessed treasures beyond counting. Yet his mind was burdened with the worries of his empire, with threats from rivals, and with the heavy weight of his responsibilities. As they spoke, the Buddha might have gestured towards a solitary monk meditating nearby, sitting in perfect stillness under the shade of a tree. The monk owned nothing but the simple robes on his back and the bowl in his lap. The king, seeing this, might have felt a sense of pity, but the Buddha would explain that this monk, in his apparent poverty, was experiencing a form of wealth the king could barely imagine. Free from the craving for more, free from the fear of loss, free from the burdens of a complex identity, the monk possessed the one thing the king truly lacked: a mind completely and utterly at peace. He had nothing, and so he was free to enjoy everything. This points to the ultimate realization on this path. When you truly need nothing from the world, you come to possess it all. When your happiness is no longer conditional on getting a particular outcome, the entire unfolding of life ceases to be a source of anxiety and becomes a source of wonder. You are no longer a beggar, pleading with the universe for scraps of pleasure. You become a quiet sovereign in the unshakable kingdom of your own mind. We have now looked at frequency as the quality of our inner state, and prosperity as the treasure of our inner wealth. But to begin the practical work of cultivating this true abundance, we must first be willing to look with unflinching honesty at the nature of our spiritual poverty. We must be courageous enough to diagnose the universal condition that sends us searching for fulfillment in all the wrong places. This means we must turn our attention to the first great truth the Buddha articulated, a truth that, once understood, opens the door to liberation, the truth of our shared human experience of dissatisfaction. The truth of Dukkha is the prosperity we are truly seeking to realize on the inside. To begin a journey of healing, a doctor must first make an honest diagnosis. They must look clearly at the symptoms, understand the nature of the ailment, and name it without fear or euphemism. This act of naming is not one of pessimism, but of profound care and practical necessity. It is the essential first step toward a cure. In his first great teaching, the Buddha did precisely this for the human condition. He offered a diagnosis. This diagnosis is often translated from the ancient Pali language with the single heavy word, suffering. And because of this translation, the entire path has often been misperceived as negative, world-denying, or pessimistic. But the original word, dukkha, carries a meaning far more subtle, nuanced, and universally applicable than just tragic pain. To understand dukkha is not to resign oneself to misery. It is to finally be given the correct name for the subtle, persistent spiritual ailment that haunts even the most successful and fortunate among us. It is the beginning of all wisdom, the courageous first step toward unshakable inner freedom. At its most obvious level, dukkha is indeed the pain and suffering we all know intimately. This is called dukkha, the suffering of painful experiences. It is the sharp pain of a migraine headache, the dull ache of a chronic illness. It is the grief that hollows us out when we lose someone we love. It is the sting of betrayal, the anxiety of financial uncertainty, the frustration of failure, and the deep sadness of loneliness. Our modern lives have created their own unique flavors of this overt suffering. The chronic stress of burnout from a demanding career, the feeling of being perpetually overwhelmed by a relentless flow of information, the quiet desperation of feeling disconnected despite being hyper-connected online. No one is immune to this dimension of life. It is the raw, unavoidable pain that is part of the contract of being human, of having a body and a heart that can be injured and broken. To deny this reality is to live in a state of fantasy. The path of wisdom begins with acknowledging this truth without flinching. But if this were the only meaning of dukkha, the teaching would be little more than a statement of the obvious. The Buddha's diagnosis goes much deeper. The second type of dukkha is more subtle and perhaps more pervasive in our affluent society. It is called viparinama dukkha, the suffering of change, or the suffering inherent in pleasant experiences. This sounds like a contradiction. How can our happy moments be a source of suffering? The suffering arises not from the experience itself, but from our relationship to it. It arises from the fact that all pleasant experiences are impermanent. The beautiful vacation must come to an end. The delicious meal is over in a few minutes. The thrill of a new romance eventually settles into something more familiar. The peak of professional achievement is followed by the pressure to sustain it or the fear of its decline. The suffering here is the subtle, background anxiety that comes from knowing, consciously or unconsciously, that this good feeling will not last. It is the stress of clinging, of trying to hold on to water as it slips through our fingers. We grasp at the pleasant moment, trying to freeze it in time, and in that very act of grasping, we introduce a tension, a fear of its inevitable passing. Our entire culture of social media is a vast engine for this type of dukkha. We scroll through highlight reels of other people's perfect moments, the flawless wedding, the exotic beach, the happy family portrait, and we are filled with a craving to have those moments and a subtle anxiety that our own life, with its messy, uncurated reality, doesn't measure up. We are constantly chasing fleeting pleasures, hoping that the next one will finally be the one that lasts forever, a hope that is doomed to perpetual frustration. The third and most profound level of dukkha is called sankhara dukkha. This is the suffering of conditioned existence itself. It is the deep, underlying, and often unnoticed hum of unsatisfactoriness that is woven into the very fabric of our lives as conditioned beings. It is the existential friction that comes from being a self that is not solid or permanent, but is instead a constantly shifting process of thoughts, feelings, and sensations. It is the inherent vulnerability and instability of an existence that is dependent on 1,000 causes and conditions beyond our control, from the health of our cells to the state of the economy. This is the vague restlessness that makes it difficult to simply sit still without distraction. It is the feeling that something is fundamentally unsettled, the itch in the back of the mind that we are constantly trying to scratch with entertainment, with work, with food, with conversation, with anything to avoid a confrontation with the raw, unvarnished reality of our own contingent being. Our modern work and consume cycle is a massive, collective strategy for avoiding this background dukkha. We work ourselves into a state of exhaustion to earn money, to buy things and experiences that we hope will finally quiet this inner restlessness. But the relief is always temporary. The hum always returns. And so the cycle must begin again, more intensely this time. This is the deepest diagnosis. Our fundamental condition is one of subtle, inherent unease. To understand these layers of our condition, the Buddha offered a simple, powerful parable, the story of the second arrow. Imagine you are walking through a forest, and you are struck by an arrow. This is the first arrow. It causes immediate, physical pain. This is dukkha dukkha, the unavoidable pains and sorrows of life. Sickness, loss, accidents, injustice, these first arrows will, at times, strike us all. It is impossible to go through life without ever being hit by one. But what do we usually do when struck by this first arrow? We immediately shoot a second arrow into ourselves. This second arrow is our reaction to the first. It is the arrow of our mind. We say, "Why me? This is terrible. I can't believe this happened. It shouldn't be this way. I can't stand it." This second arrow is made of our anger, our resentment, our fear, our self-pity, and our judgments. The pain from the first arrow is real, but it is the wound from the second arrow that truly creates what we call suffering. It is the second arrow that festers, that infects the original wound, that causes us long-term anguish. The Buddha's teaching is not a magical method for dodging all of life's first arrows. That is impossible. The path is about learning the profound skill of not shooting the second arrow. It is about learning to meet the unavoidable pain of life with a mind of wisdom and equanimity, rather than one of resistance and fear. Seeing life through this lens of dukkha is not pessimistic. It is the opposite. It is the ultimate act of optimism. Imagine going to a doctor with a persistent illness, and the doctor says, There is nothing wrong with you. Just think positively. This would be a cruel and useless diagnosis. A truly compassionate and effective doctor is one who says, "Yes, I see the problem clearly. You have an infection. It has a name, it has a cause, and here is the medicine that will cure it." By courageously and clearly diagnosing the universal human condition of dukkha in all its forms, the Buddha was not condemning us to a life of misery. He was giving us the essential, empowering first step. He was telling us that the vague, persistent sense of dissatisfaction that haunts us is not a personal failure. It is a shared, understandable condition. And by naming it, he gave us the power to begin asking the next, most important question. If this dissatisfaction is the symptom, what is its cause? Once a clear diagnosis has been made, the focus of any intelligent investigation shifts naturally to the cause. If we accept the diagnosis of dukkhatis, pervasive, underlying hum of dissatisfaction in our lives, we are compelled to ask the next logical question: where does it come from? What is the virus that causes this spiritual fever? The Buddha's answer, articulated in his second noble truth, is as direct as it is profound. The origin of our suffering, he explained, is a force he called tanha. This Pali word is often translated as desire, but this single word is too broad and can be misleading. We desire to be healthy. We desire for our loved ones to be happy surely. These are not the cause of suffering. The term tanha has a much more specific and visceral meaning. It means thirst. It is not a gentle wish. It is a primal, urgent, burning craving. It is the deep, compulsive itch to pull pleasant experiences toward us and to push unpleasant experiences away. It is the fundamental tension between the world as it is and the world as we demand it to be. This thirst, this tanha, is the engine that powers the endless cycle of dukkha. To understand its operation in our lives, it's helpful to see that this thirst manifests in three distinct flavors. The first, and most recognizable, is kama tanha, the thirst for sense pleasures. This is the craving for beautiful sights, pleasing sounds, delicious tastes, pleasant smells, and enjoyable physical sensations. Our entire modern consumer economy is a temple built to the worship of kama tanha. It is the endless scroll through curated images on Instagram, each one a whisper that our life could be more beautiful, more exciting. It is the targeted ad that knows our secret longings before we do, promising that this one product will finally fill the void. It is the craving for the next episode in a series, the next sugary drink, the next vacation, the next dopamine hit from a notification on our phone. This thirst promises satisfaction, but by its very nature can only deliver fleeting pleasure. The more we feed it, the stronger it becomes. The gourmet meal satisfies for an hour, but leaves us seeking an even more refined taste tomorrow. The new car is thrilling for a month until it becomes just the car, and our eyes begin to wander to the newer model. We are conditioned from birth to believe that quenching this thirst is the very definition of happiness. Yet in practice, it feels more like drinking salt water. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. The second flavor of this thirst is deeper and more subtle. It is bhava tanha, the thirst for becoming, for existence. This is the craving to be someone, to have a solid, lasting, important identity. It is the engine behind our ambition, the desperate need to leave a mark, to build a legacy, to be recognized and remembered. This thirst fuels the frantic climb up the corporate ladder, the obsession with followers and likes as a metric of self-worth, the deep-seated fear of being ordinary. It is the ego's desperate project to establish itself as a permanent entity in a world of constant flux. We cling to our titles, our roles, our achievements, and our beliefs as if they were a life raft in the ocean of impermanence. But this raft is made of smoke. When our identity is threatened, when we lose a job, when a relationship ends, when we are criticized, the suffering is intense because we feel that our very being is under attack. Bhava tanha is the craving to be a fixed noun in a universe that is composed entirely of verbs. It is a fundamental resistance to the fluid, flowing nature of reality, and this resistance is a constant source of underlying tension and fear. The third flavor is the dark shadow of the second. It is vibhava tanha, the thirst for non-existence, for annihilation. This is the craving to get rid of something, to escape. When the pursuit of pleasure and the project of self-building become too painful, too exhausting, this thirst arises. It is the desire to numb the pain of existence. In its milder forms, it is the compulsive need for distraction, to lose ourselves in work, in entertainment, in anything that helps us avoid the discomfort of our own minds. In its more intense forms, it is the pull towards substance abuse, addiction, and in the most tragic cases, suicide. It is the voice that whispers, "I just can't take it anymore, I want out." This is the ultimate expression of aversion, the desperate attempt to annihilate a painful experience, a difficult emotion, or the very self that seems to be the source of the pain. It is the final, desperate strategy of a mind that has not learned any other way to deal with the unavoidable first arrows of life. These three thirsts for pleasure, for becoming, and for annihilation form the unholy trinity that keeps us bound to the wheel of suffering. Psychologists in the 20th century, without any reference to Buddhist thought, identified this exact mechanism and gave it a modern name, the hedonic treadmill. The concept is simple. Each of us has a baseline level of happiness. When we experience a positive event, a pay raise, a new relationship or happiness level temporarily spikes, but very quickly it returns to the old baseline. We adapt. The new, better condition is now the norm. To get another spike of happiness, we now need an even bigger pay raise, an even more exciting experience. We are like a hamster in a wheel, running faster and faster just to stay in the same place. This is tanha in clinical terms. It is a built-in feature of our psychological makeup, a loop that ensures we are never satisfied for long. Advertising and modern capitalism have learned to masterfully exploit this feature of our minds. They don't sell us products, they sell us the temporary relief from the itch of tanha. They first create a feeling of lack, of inadequacy, and then they present their product as the scratch. But the relief is momentary, and the itch always returns, often stronger than before. To capture the profound pathos of this condition, Buddhist cosmology offers a powerful and haunting image: the realm of the hungry ghosts, or pretas. These beings are depicted with enormous, distended bellies, representing their insatiable, all-consuming desire. Yet they have necks as thin as a needle's eye and mouths the size of a pinhole. No matter how much they try to consume, they can never take in enough to fill the aching void of their stomachs. They are figures of perpetual, agonizing frustration. This is not just a mythological creature. It is a psychological portrait of the mind in the grip of tanha. It is the state of having boundless desires and a near-total incapacity to be fulfilled. When we are caught in the throes of craving, scrolling endlessly, consuming mindlessly, chasing relentlessly, we are living in the preta realm. We are the hungry ghosts, haunted by a thirst that can never be quenched. Looking at our suffering through this lens is incredibly empowering. It tells us that the source of our dissatisfaction is not a flaw in the world. The world is not failing to provide us with enough pleasure or security. The source of our dissatisfaction is not a personal failure, some inherent defect in our character. The cause is this impersonal, universal, and understandable mechanism of thirst, of tanha. We have now moved from symptom to cause. We have followed the trail of our discontent back to its very origin. And in doing so, we stand at a pivotal turning point. For if the cause of our suffering is an internal process, then the possibility of its cessation must also lie within us. We are not doomed to be hungry ghosts forever. There is a way to step off the hedonic treadmill. There is a way to quench the fire of craving. This realization, this glimmer of hope, leads us directly to the Buddha's third great truth, the truth that there can be an end to our suffering. Having diagnosed the pervasive illness of dissatisfaction, Dukkha, and having traced its origins to the burning thirst of craving, tanha, we arrive at a crucial, precarious moment. We stand before the physician of the soul, having heard the diagnosis and its cause, and we hold our breath, waiting for the prognosis. Is this condition terminal? Are we doomed to live as hungry ghosts, forever chasing a satisfaction that can never be found? Is the hedonic treadmill our permanent home? It is here that the Buddhist path reveals itself not as a pessimistic philosophy, but as a teaching of radical, earth-shaking hope. The Buddha's third noble truth is the truth of nirodha, a word that translates as cessation. It is the definitive, unambiguous statement that the illness is curable. The thirst can be quenched. The fire of suffering can be extinguished. There is an end to dukkha. This is not a statement of blind faith or a comforting platitude. It is presented as a discoverable truth, a testable hypothesis about the ultimate potential of the human mind. It is the light at the end of the tunnel, a light that promises not just relief, but total liberation. Before we can fully appreciate the radiant promise of nirodha, we must first be very clear about what it is not. The concept of cessation, often associated with the word nibbana or nirvana, has been shrouded in centuries of misconception in the Western imagination. Firstly, nirvana is not a place. It is not a heavenly realm you go to after you die, a kind of spiritual country club for the enlightened. It is a state of mind, a psychological reality that can be experienced here and now, in this very life, in the midst of this very world. Secondly, it is not a state of annihilation or nothingness. The idea of blowing out does not refer to the annihilation of the self, but to the extinguishing of the fires that cause suffering, the fires of greed, the fires of hatred, and the fires of delusion. What is extinguished is the suffering, the fever, the torment. The person does not vanish. The prison walls of their own reactive mind dissolve, leaving them more fully, authentically present than ever before. Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly for a modern audience, this state of cessation is not one of cold, detached indifference. It is not about becoming a passionless zombie, numb to the joys and sorrows of the world. In fact, the opposite is true. When the distorting filters of selfish craving and fearful aversion are removed, the mind's natural qualities of warmth, clarity, and connection can shine forth unimpeded. True, boundless compassion, or karuna, and unconditional loving kindness, or metta, can only arise from a mind that is no longer obsessed with its own agenda. You do not stop feeling, you simply stop suffering from your feelings. The pain of the first arrow, the unavoidable pain of life still arrives. You will still experience loss. You will still feel the sorrow of a friend's misfortune. You will still get sick. Nirodha does not make you superhuman. It makes you fully, wisely human. It is the complete and total cessation of shooting that second arrow of mental reactivity. The pain of the first arrow comes and goes, but the self-inflicted anguish of the second arrow is gone for good. So what then is this state of nirodha, this nibbana? The most powerful metaphor is that of cooling. Imagine the mind in its ordinary, agitated state, inflamed by the constant fever of wanting and not wanting. It is hot, restless, and tormented. Nibbana is the cooling of this fever. It is a profound inner peace, a deep stillness that is not disturbed by the changing circumstances of the external world. It is an unshakable stability. Think of the deep ocean, whose surface may be whipped into a frenzy by a storm, but whose depths remain perfectly, silently still. A mind that has realized cessation has found this inner depth. It is also, fundamentally, a state of freedom. It is liberation from the tyranny of our own compulsive habits. We are no longer a puppet jerked around by the strings of every passing desire and fear. We are no longer a slave to the endless, exhausting project of defending, pleasing, and promoting a fragile sense of self. It is a psychological emancipation of the highest order. When the winds of tanha finally cease, the turbulent waters of the mind grow calm and clear. For the first time, we can see reality as it is, without the distortions of our own projections. This clarity is itself a source of profound peace. This might sound like a lofty, far-off goal, something reserved for saints and sages in distant caves. But the beauty of this teaching is that cessation is not an all-or-nothing affair. We can experience momentary tastes of nibbana, fleeting moments of nirodha in our daily lives. Every time you feel the urge to make a cutting remark in an argument, and you pause, take a breath, and choose silence instead. That is a micro moment of cessation. The fire of aversion was about to flare, and you allowed it to cool. Every time you are caught in a spiral of anxious worry about the future, and you manage to bring your attention back to the simple sensation of your feet on the floor, feeling the solid ground beneath you, that is a taste of cessation. The fire of fear was burning, and for a moment you found the coolness of the present. Every time you mindfully enjoy a simple cup of tea without needing to do anything else, without thinking you should be more productive, you are experiencing a moment of nibbana. The thirst for becoming was quieted, and you rested in the simple peace of being. These moments are clues. They are signposts pointing to a deeper possibility, showing us that the path to peace is not about adding anything to ourselves, but about letting go of what burdens us. To understand how this release happens, consider the simple analogy of a room that has been sealed in darkness for 1,000 years. If you want to bring light into that room, what do? Do you need to engage in an epic battle with the darkness? Do you need to attack it, to shovel it out, to push it away? Do you need to fight the darkness for 1,000 years to undo its long reign? Of course not. The idea is absurd. Darkness has no substance of its own. It is simply the absence of light. All you need to do is light a single candle or open a single shutter, and the darkness vanishes instantly, as if it were never there. Our suffering is like that darkness. Our ignorance, our craving, our fear, they seem so solid, so powerful, so real. We are tempted to fight them, to suppress our thoughts, to wrestle with our desires. But this just creates more tension and struggle. The path of wisdom suggests a different approach. We don't have to fight the darkness. We simply have to introduce the light. The light, in this case, is the quality of mindfulness, of clear, non-judgmental awareness. When the light of awareness is brought to a craving, the craving is seen for what it is, impersonal, impermanent energy, and it loses its power over us. When the light of awareness is brought to a fear, the fear is met with a gentle curiosity rather than resistance, and it begins to dissolve. Suffering, like darkness, cannot survive being illuminated. The third noble truth, the truth of cessation, is the turning point of the entire journey. It transforms the Buddha's message from a stark diagnosis into a charter of human potential. It asserts that our suffering is not our identity. It is not a life sentence. It is a temporary, conditioned, and treatable state. We are not fundamentally flawed or broken. We are simply caught in a web of our own making, and because we made it, we can also unmake it. The prison door has been open all along. We just haven't realized it. This profound promise of freedom, this light at the end of the tunnel, naturally gives rise to the final, most practical question of all. If a cure exists, what is the medicine? If there is a path that leads out of the prison, what are the steps? This question leads us directly to the Buddha's final and most comprehensive teaching, the prescription for the end of suffering, the map that guides us out of the darkness, the fourth noble truth, the Noble Eightfold Path. Having arrived at the breathtaking realization that an end to our inner turmoil is possible, that the state of profound peace called nirodha is an achievable human birthright, the question that burns brightest in the mind is no longer what or why, but how. If a cure for our spiritual dis-ease exists, then what is the prescription? If there is a shore of safety beyond the turbulent ocean of our suffering, what is the vessel that can carry us there? The Buddha's answer to this most practical of questions is the fourth noble truth. It is the truth of the path, or Magga. He did not simply offer a diagnosis and a hopeful prognosis. He laid out a clear, detailed, and comprehensive roadmap. This map is known as the Noble Eightfold Path, a complete system for living that, when cultivated, leads directly from the tangled confusion of Dukkha to the spacious freedom of Nibbana. This is the practical heart of the teaching, the guide that transforms a beautiful philosophy into a lived, breathing reality. When we first encounter a list of 8 steps, our modern, linear minds tend to think of it as a sequence, like a staircase to be climbed one step at a time. We imagine we must first perfect step 1, right view, before we can begin to work on step 2, right intention, and so on. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of the path's profound and elegant design. The 8 factors are not sequential steps, but rather 8 interwoven strands of a single, powerful rope. To try and perfect one strand before touching the others would be impossible. Instead, they are to be cultivated simultaneously, each one supporting and strengthening all the others in a beautiful synergy. For example, practicing right mindfulness helps us to see our true intentions more clearly, which in turn strengthens right intention. Living with right action, a life of harmlessness, creates the inner peace necessary to practice right concentration. Each part of the path informs and enriches every other part. To make this holistic system easier to grasp, the 8 factors are traditionally grouped into 3 essential trainings. The first is the training in ethical conduct, or sila. This forms the foundation of the entire path. It includes right speech, right action, and right livelihood. This is the aspect of the path that governs our relationship with the world, our conduct with other beings. It is about creating an external environment of integrity, harmlessness, and trust. By committing to speak truthfully and kindly, to act with respect for all life, and to earn a living in a way that contributes to well-being rather than harm, we calm the most flagrant disturbances in our lives. We build a foundation of self-respect and remove the inner poisons of guilt and remorse, creating the stability necessary for the deeper work to begin. The second training is in mental discipline, or samadhi. This group includes right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Once our outward behavior is no longer causing chaos, we can turn our attention inward to the source of the chaos, the untrained mind. This is the work of taming and shaping our own consciousness. Through right effort, we learn to gently encourage wholesome states of mind and let go of unwholesome ones. Through right mindfulness, we develop a clear, steady, non-judgmental awareness of our present moment experience. And through right concentration, we cultivate the ability to unify and focus the mind, giving it the strength and stability of a laser beam. This is the inner work of moving the mind from a state of fragmentation and distraction to one of cohesion and calm. The third training, which is the ultimate fruit of the path, is wisdom or panya. This includes right view and right intention. When the mind is calmed and stabilized through the discipline of samadhi and supported by a life of ethical conduct, a new clarity emerges. We begin to see things not as we wish they were, or as we fear they might be, but as they truly are. This clear seeing is wisdom. Right view is the intellectual and intuitive grasp of the nature of reality, understanding dukkha, its cause, its cessation, and the path. Right intention is the alignment of our will with this wisdom, directing our energy toward letting go, toward kindness, and toward compassion. In a beautiful display of the path's interconnectedness, wisdom is both the beginning and the end of the journey. A flicker of right view is needed to even want to step onto the path, and the full blossoming of that wisdom is its final culmination. This entire eightfold system is also known as the middle path. This concept is crucial. Before his awakening, the Buddha spent years exploring the two extremes of spiritual seeking that were common in his day. First, he lived the life of a prince, indulging in every conceivable form of sensual pleasure. He had the finest clothes, the most delicious food, every form of entertainment. He discovered that this path, the path of hedonism, did not lead to lasting happiness. It only led to a deeper craving, a more frantic search for the next pleasure, a life enslaved to the senses. Then, rejecting this, he swung to the opposite extreme. He became a hardcore ascetic, punishing his body with severe fasting and harsh practices, believing that by torturing the body, he could liberate the spirit. He starved himself until his ribs were visible and he could feel his spine through his stomach. He discovered that this path, too, was a dead end. It led only to a weakened body and an obsessed, tormented mind, not to clarity or peace. The great breakthrough came when he remembered a simple image from his youth. He recalled a musician explaining how to tune a lute or a sitar. "If you tighten the string too much," the musician said, "it becomes shrill and will eventually snap. If you leave the string too loose, it will not produce a clear musical note, only a dull thud. Only when the string is tuned just right, not too tight and not too loose, can it produce beautiful resonant music." In that moment, he understood. The path to awakening was not a path of extremes. It was a middle path, a path of exquisite balance. We must care for our bodies and our minds, providing them with what they need to be healthy and strong. This is the string that is not too loose. But we must not become enslaved by our appetites and desires, constantly seeking more and more pleasure. This is the string that is not too tight. The Noble Eightfold Path is the definitive guide to tuning the instrument of our own being, so that our lives can produce the beautiful music of wisdom and compassion. It is not a path of grim denial, nor is it one of heedless indulgence. It is a path of intelligent, skillful, and joyful balance. The word right in each of the path factors, sama in Pali, can also be translated as skillful, complete, or wise. It is not about being morally right versus wrong in a rigid dogmatic sense. It is about what is skillful versus unskillful in the dedicated project of ending our own suffering. The path is not a list of divine commandments. It is a user's manual for the human heart and mind, offered with compassion, to be tested in the laboratory of our own experience. This, then, is the prescription, a complete, holistic, and balanced blueprint for human flourishing. It addresses our view of the world, the deepest intentions that motivate us, the words we speak, the actions we take, the way we sustain ourselves, and the intricate inner workings of our own minds. It is a path of active cultivation, not passive belief. It is a training, a journey that unfolds over a lifetime. And like all great journeys, it must begin with a single crucial step. It must begin with getting our bearings, with understanding the map itself, with seeing our situation clearly. The entire journey begins and is guided by the very first path factor. It begins with right view. To embark upon any journey without a map or a compass is to invite frustration and disaster. No matter how strong your will or how sturdy your vessel, without a clear sense of direction, all your effort may only lead you further astray. The Noble Eightfold Path begins with its own compass, its own guiding star. It is called Samaditeti, or right view. It is placed first on the list for a reason. It is the prerequisite for all that follows. It is the lens through which we must look, the correct understanding of the terrain that allows us to navigate the path skillfully. Without a glimmer of right view, we would have no reason to even take the first step. With it, every subsequent step becomes purposeful, clear, and effective. It is the foundation upon which the entire edifice of liberation is built. It is essential from the outset to understand what right view is not. In a culture that is often wary of religious dogma, the word right can sound authoritarian, as if it is demanding blind belief in a set of doctrines. But this is a misunderstanding of the spirit of the path. Right view is not about uncritically accepting a creed or forcing yourself to believe in something you have not experienced. The Pali word ditthiti translates more accurately as view or perspective. In the way we talk about seeing something with our own eyes, it is about perception, not mere conception. The path does not ask for blind faith. It invites investigation. It provides a working hypothesis about the nature of reality and suffering, and asks us to test it rigorously in the laboratory of our own lived experience. The goal is not to simply believe in these truths, but to gradually, through practice, come to see them for yourself, directly and intuitively. It is the difference between reading a description of water and actually feeling its coolness on your skin. So, what is the content of this skillful view? What does a person with right view actually see? At its most fundamental level, right view is the clear seeing and understanding of the Four Noble Truths. It is the intellectual grasp of the diagnosis we have explored. The truth that there is a fundamental unsatisfactoriness, dukkha, in our conditioned existence. The truth that this dukkha arises from a specific cause, the thirst of tanha. The truth that there can be a cessation of this dukkha, nirodha, and the truth that there is a path leading to that cessation, the Noble Eightfold Path itself. This framework is the basic grammar of a liberated life. It orients us away from blaming the world or other people for our unhappiness and directs our attention toward the internal causes and conditions that we have the power to change. Flowing from this is a clear understanding of the law of karma, or karma. In the popular imagination, karma is often seen as a system of cosmic reward and punishment, a kind of mystical scorekeeping. The Buddhist understanding is far more psychological and practical. It is the simple, natural law of cause and effect applied to our inner world. The Buddha stated that the essence of karma is intention, or satana. It is our volition, the will behind our actions, that plants the seeds of our future experience. Wholesome intentions, those rooted in generosity, kindness, and wisdom, will inevitably ripen into experiences of happiness and peace. Unwholesome intentions, those rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, will inevitably ripen into experiences of suffering. Understanding this law is incredibly empowering. It means we are not the victims of a random fate, nor are we subject to the whims of an external judge. We are the architects of our own lives. Every moment presents a choice, an opportunity to plant seeds of future well-being for ourselves and others. This understanding provides the powerful, intrinsic motivation for cultivating the ethical and mental discipline of the path. As our practice deepens, right view evolves from an intellectual understanding into a direct, penetrating insight into the fundamental nature of existence itself. This is the seeing of what are called the three marks of existence. The first is anicca, or impermanence. We begin to see, not just as a concept, but in the raw data of our experience, that everything is in a state of constant flux. Our thoughts arise and pass away. Our emotions ebb and flow. Our bodies are changing from moment to moment. The world around us is a ceaseless process of becoming and dissolving. The second mark is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. Seeing the universal reality of impermanence, we directly understand why trying to find lasting security in things that are constantly changing is a recipe for frustration. The suffering isn't a flaw in the world. It's a result of a flawed strategy for finding happiness. The third and most profound mark is anatta, or not, self. Through careful observation, we begin to see that within this constantly changing process of mind and body, there is no fixed, solid, independent I to be found. What we call a self is a temporary coalition of physical and mental processes, an interdependent, flowing current, not a static entity. This final insight is what strikes at the very root of our selfish craving, because if there is no permanent self to aggrandize or defend, the entire project of greed and hatred loses its foundation. The predicament of holding a wrong view is perfectly captured in the ancient Indian parable of the blind men and the elephant. A king gathered a group of men who had been blind from birth and brought an elephant before them. He invited each of them to touch the elephant and describe what it was. The first man touched the elephant's leg and declared, "An elephant is like a great pillar." The second man touched the trunk and announced, "No, an elephant is like a thick snake." A third, feeling the ear, said, "You are both wrong. An elephant is like a large, rough fan." Another touched the smooth, hard tusk and insisted it was like a spear. Soon, they were all shouting at each other, each one absolutely convinced that their own partial, limited experience was the whole and complete truth. We are all, to some extent, like these blind men. We grasp onto one small piece of realiter political beliefs, our scientific theories, our personal history, our fleeting pleasures and pain sand. We mistake that small piece for the entire elephant. Wrong view is this fragmented, partial seeing. We construct our lives based on these incomplete and distorted maps, and then we are bewildered when we find ourselves lost and in pain. Right view is the development of the capacity to see the whole elephant. It is the holistic, integrated perspective that arises from the cultivation of the entire Eightfold Path, allowing us to see how all the different parts of life and the mind fit together into a coherent whole. This complete and skillful view is not something one is born with, nor is it granted from on high. It is cultivated through a gradual training. The process begins with learning, by listening to the teachings or reading the words of those who have walked the path before. This is like getting a copy of the map for the first time. The next stage is contemplation, where we think deeply about these teachings, questioning them, examining them, and seeing how they relate to our own experience of the world. This is like studying the map, understanding its symbols and tracing the route with our finger. But the final, indispensable stage is meditation, or direct cultivation. Through the practice of insight meditation, we stop just looking at the map and we begin to walk the territory. We move from thinking about the truth of impermanence to directly experiencing the arising and passing away of each breath, each sensation, each thought. It is this direct, non-conceptual seeing that transforms right view from a fragile opinion into an unshakable, liberating wisdom. Right view, then, is the compass that orients our entire spiritual life. It ensures that our efforts are not wasted and that we are moving in the direction of freedom. Once our perception of the world begins to shift, once we start to see the relationship between our actions and our happiness more clearly, our motivation for action naturally begins to change as well. A clear view of our situation inspires a skillful intention for how to proceed. It is this shift in our deepest motivations that marks the next step on our journey, the step of right intention. If right view is the compass that gives us our bearing on the spiritual journey, then right intention is the hand that sets the rudder of the ship. In Pali, the term is sama sankappa. It signifies our resolve, our purpose, our aspiration. It is the active, volitional side of wisdom. It is not enough to simply see the map of reality clearly. We must consciously and wholeheartedly choose to align our life's direction with that map. Right intention is the moment the journey transforms from a passive observation into a deliberate, conscious undertaking. It is the heart's affirmative response to the clarity of the mind. It is the pivotal act of setting our course for the shore of Nibbana, not because we are told to, but because we have seen for ourselves that it is the only direction that leads to true safety and peace. It is where we take the abstract truth and begin to weave it into the very fabric of our being. In the profound psychological system of the Buddha, intention is everything. He declared that intention, or cetana, is the very essence of karma. It is not the external action itself, but the inner motive, the quality of will that precedes and accompanies the action, which plants the karmic seed that will ripen in our lives. The world may judge us by our actions, but we experience the world based on our intentions. Two actions can look identical on the surface, but create vastly different inner realities and future results. Imagine, for example, three people giving $1 to a person sitting on the street. The first person gives the dollar out of a genuine upwelling of compassion, a simple wish for the other person to be free from suffering. The second person gives the dollar because their friends are watching and they want to appear generous and virtuous. The third person gives the dollar out of annoyance, simply to get the person to stop asking so they can walk by without feeling guilty. The external action is the same in all three cases. A dollar has changed hands, but the inner action, the intention, is completely different. The first person plants a seed of pure compassion and experiences a moment of lightness and connection. The second person plants a seed of ego and attachment to reputation, experiencing a moment of pride mixed with anxiety. The third person plants a seed of aversion, experiencing a moment of irritation and reinforcing a pattern of pushing away discomfort. This understanding is deeply empowering. It means that in every moment, we have control over the most crucial variable in our happiness. We may not be able to control the ultimate outcomes of our actions in the unpredictable world, but we can always choose the inner quality from which we act. This is our true creative power. The Buddha didn't just tell us to have good intentions. He specified exactly what a right intention looks like. He broke it down into three distinct yet interconnected facets. These are the wholesome directions we consciously resolve to steer the mind toward, moving away from the toxic currents of our habitual patterns. The first is the intention of renunciation. The word renunciation often sounds severe to the Western ear, evoking images of harsh self-denial and joyless austerity. But its true meaning, nekkhamma, is closer to letting go or yielding. It is not an intention to deprive ourselves, but an intention to unburden ourselves. It is the wise resolve to let go of our obsessive clinging to sense pleasures, to release our white-knuckled grip on wanting things to be a certain way, to relax our attachment to the endless project of the ego. It is the recognition that our cravings are not a source of joy, but a heavy, exhausting burden. The intention of renunciation is the choice to trade the fleeting, agitating pleasures of grasping for the deep, abiding peace of contentment. It is the choice of simplicity over complexity, of inner freedom over outer accumulation. It is the liberating intention to find happiness not by adding more, but by needing less. The second facet is the intention of goodwill, or non-ill will. In Pali, this is abhyapada, and it is the direct, powerful antidote to the poison of aversion. It is the conscious, deliberate choice to meet every being and every situation with a mind of friendliness, kindness, and warmth. This is the active cultivation of what is known as metta. It does not mean we will never feel flashes of anger, irritation, or fear. We are human, and these feelings will arise. But right intention means we make a firm resolution not to welcome them, not to feed them, not to let them set up camp in our minds. When we notice resentment brewing, we intentionally replace it with a thought of kindness. When we feel hatred rising, we recognize it as a poison that harms us more than anyone else, and we resolve to put it down. This is a radical practice. It includes extending goodwill even to those we find difficult or those who have hurt us. We do this not necessarily because they deserve our forgiveness, but because we deserve to be free from the corrosive, self-inflicted pain of our own bitterness. Holding on to anger, as the saying goes, is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. The intention of goodwill is the loving resolve to put down the cup of poison for our own sake. The third facet is the intention of harmlessness. This is avihimsa, which is the foundation of compassion or karuna. Flowing naturally from a heart of goodwill, this is the active intention not to cause harm in thought, word, or deed to any living creature, including ourselves. It is the recognition of our profound interconnectedness, the understanding that the suffering of others is not separate from our own. When we encounter suffering, this intention guides us to respond with a desire to alleviate it, rather than with indifference, judgment, or fear. This intention informs all aspects of our life. It makes us question the consequences of our consumption, the ethics of our work, the impact of our words. It fosters a gentle, protective quality in the mind. It is the deep, heartfelt wish for the safety and well-being of all. These three intentions of renunciation, of goodwill, and of harmlessness are the noble aspirations that guide our inner compass, pulling us away from the gravitational field of the three poisons. To see how this works in a practical way, consider the story of two men working to build a great temple. They are side by side, performing the exact same task of laying heavy stones under the hot sun. A traveler approaches the first man and asks him, "My friend, what is it that you are doing?" The man sighs, wiping the sweat from his forehead with a dirty hand. He replies with a grumble, "I'm hauling stones. It's back-breaking work, and the pay is barely enough to feed my family. I do this all day until my body aches, and tomorrow I will do it again." The traveler then moves to the second man and asks the very same question, "My friend, what is it that you are doing?" The second man pauses, looks at the stone in his hands, and then up at the rising structure. His eyes are clear and full of purpose. He says with a quiet smile, "I am building a house of God. I am creating a sacred space where people for generations to come, people I will never meet, can come to find peace, refuge, and a connection to the divine." Now, the physical action of these two men is identical, but their intention, their sankappa, is worlds apart. The first man's experience is one of toil, resentment, and suffering, driven by an intention of mere personal survival. The second man's experience is one of meaning, contribution, and even joy, driven by an intention of generosity and higher purpose. Their karma is different. Their state of mind is different. Their very frequency is different. Every moment of our lives, we are one of these two builders. The simple, conscious choice of our intention has the power to transform the most mundane and difficult tasks into a sacred and meaningful practice. Cultivating right intention is, therefore, the revolutionary practice of learning to pause. In the space between a stimulus and our habitual reaction, we create a moment of conscious inquiry. We ask ourselves the most important question: what is my motive right now? From where is this impulse to speak or act arising? Is it coming from the contracting, agitated mind of greed, hatred, and delusion? Or is it arising from the spacious, peaceful mind of generosity, kindness, and wisdom? Simply asking this question begins to change everything. It is the first step in moving from being an automaton, driven by the unconscious scripts of our past, to becoming a conscious, noble, and intentional creator of our present and future. These wholesome intentions, cultivated in the quiet of our hearts, are the seeds of a better world. But seeds cannot remain hidden in the soil forever. They must sprout and manifest in the world. The first and most immediate soil in which they grow is our communication. The quality of our intention directly determines the quality of our speech. Our intentions, those silent, powerful currents of the heart, do not remain hidden for long. They seek expression. They seek to manifest in the world, and their very first and most constant outlet is the words we speak. Speech is not merely sound. It is action in its purest form. Our words are potent seeds that we cast into the world, moment by moment. They have the power to build bridges of understanding or to erect walls of resentment. They can be a healing balm that soothes a wounded spirit, or a subtle poison that infects a relationship for years. In the digital age, this power is amplified 1,000-fold. A thoughtless, angry comment, typed in seconds, can circle the globe, causing harm we will never witness. A kind, encouraging email can give strength to a person we will never meet. To practice right speech, or samavacha, is to recognize this immense power and to take up the responsibility of wielding it with wisdom, skill, and compassion. It is the first great training in externalizing our inner peace. The Buddha's guidance on right speech is a model of clarity, a fourfold path of practice that moves from the obvious to the subtle. The first principle is the most foundational, to abstain from false speech. At its core, this means we make a commitment to telling the truth. We resolve not to lie, not to deceive, not to consciously mislead others. But this practice goes deeper than simply avoiding outright falsehoods. It is a commitment to integrity in all our communication. It means letting go of exaggeration that we use to make our stories more impressive. It means abandoning the subtle, calculated omissions that paint a picture favorable to us, but is not the whole truth. It means releasing the need for white lies that we often tell for convenience, but which subtly erode the foundation of trust. To live truthfully is to live with a profound simplicity. There is no need to remember which version of a story you told to which person. There is no psychic energy wasted on maintaining a web of deception. Your inner world and your outer world begin to align. This congruence creates a deep sense of self-respect and inner solidity. You become a person who can be trusted, not only by others, but most importantly, by yourself. The second principle is to abstain from divisive or slanderous speech. This is the speech that sets one person against another. It is the poison of gossip, whispered in an office hallway, the backbiting remark that damages a reputation, the spreading of rumors that creates factions and mistrust. In our modern world, this has become a dominant mode of online discourse. We see it in the partisan name-calling that deepens political divides and in the cancel culture that seeks to demolish rather than to understand. Why do we engage in such speech? It almost always arises from our own insecurity. We try to elevate our own fragile sense of self by diminishing someone else. We feel a momentary thrill of being in the know, of belonging to an in-group by excluding an out-group. But this thrill is fleeting and toxic. It plants seeds of fear and disharmony in our environment and in our own hearts. To practice the opposite is to make a conscious choice to be a force for unity. It is to refuse to pass on a piece of gossip even when it's tempting. It is to speak of the good qualities of others when they are not present. It is the active choice to build connection rather than separation, to look for common ground rather than focusing on differences. It is the quiet, noble work of weaving the fabric of community, one conversation at a time. The third principle is to abstain from harsh speech. These are the words spoken in anger, the insults, the sarcasm intended to wound, the curses, the shouting. Harsh speech is verbal violence. It is the second arrow made audible. It is our internal painer, frustration, our fear, our sense of being wronged spilling out and wounding another. It rarely solves any problem. It almost always escalates conflict and leaves behind a residue of pain and resentment that can last for years. The practice here is not one of suppression. It is not about pretending we don't feel anger. It is about learning to recognize the rising energy of anger within us and making a conscious choice not to let it hijack our tongue. It is the practice of pausing. In that sacred pause, we can choose to respond rather than to react. We can choose to speak from a place of wisdom rather than from a place of woundedness. We can learn to say, I am feeling very angry right now, and I need a moment before we continue this conversation, which is a statement of profound truth and skill. This practice transforms us from being a conduit for anger into a container that can hold it with compassionate awareness, allowing it to cool and dissipate without causing harm. The fourth principle, and perhaps the one most challenging to our modern sensibilities, is to abstain from idle chatter. This is speech that is aimless, pointless, and frivolous. It is the endless complaining, the meaningless speculation about celebrities, the hours spent in conversation that serves no purpose other than to fill silence and distract the mind from the present moment. It is the constant stream of noise that keeps our minds agitated and prevents any real depth of connection or reflection. Idle chatter is the opposite of noble silence. Noble silence is not an awkward, empty void. It is a rich, generative space. It is the space in which we can truly listen to ourselves and to others. It is the space in which insight can arise. To practice this fourth principle is to begin to value our words, to treat them as a precious resource, not to be squandered. It is to ask, is what I'm about to say meaningful? Does it add value? Does it come from a place of kindness? This doesn't mean we can never tell a joke or engage in lighthearted conversation, but it does mean we become more mindful of the overall diet of our communication, choosing to nourish ourselves and others with words of substance rather than filling our lives with the conversational equivalent of junk food. To make this practice tangible, there is a beautiful and practical filter, often attributed to the philosopher Socrates, known as the triple filter test. Before speaking, we can pass our intended words through 3 gates. The first gate is truth. Is what I am about to say true? If it is not, it should not be spoken. The second gate is goodness or kindness. Is it something good or kind? If it is true but unkind, we must pause. The third gate is usefulness or necessity. Is it useful or necessary? A statement may be true and even well-intentioned, but if it is not helpful or necessary, perhaps it is better left unsaid. And one might add a fourth gate, especially important in this teaching, the right time. Is this the appropriate time and place to say this? This simple checklist transforms right speech from a set of prohibitions into a skillful, compassionate art form. It is not about censorship, but about curation. It is the art of choosing words that create the most benefit and the least harm. Finally, we must realize that right speech is not just about what we say, it is profoundly about how we listen. The other half of skillful communication is what Thich Nhat Hanh called deep listening. This is listening with only one purpose: to help the other person empty their heart. It is listening without interrupting, without judging, without planning our response while they are still speaking. It is offering the gift of our full, non-judgmental presence. In our world, where everyone is waiting for their turn to talk, to be listened to in this way is a rare and profound act of healing. It is an act of supreme generosity. By practicing deep listening, we create a safe space for truth to emerge. And we often find that people can solve their own problems when they are simply given the space to be fully heard. Our words then become our practice. Our daily conversations become our meditation. We learn that our tongue is a powerful instrument, capable of producing the beautiful music of harmony and truth, or the jarring noise of conflict and sorrow. By committing to right speech, we take a concrete step toward making our outward life a true reflection of our noblest inner intentions. This alignment of our communication naturally prepares us for the next, even more tangible expression of our path. Aligning our physical actions and our very livelihood with the same principles of wisdom and compassion. As our wholesome intentions begin to reshape our speech, turning our words into instruments of peace, the path naturally calls for an even more tangible expression of our inner transformation. It invites us to bring our physical actions, the very way we move through the world, into alignment with our highest aspirations. This is the domain of right action, or sammakamanta. It is the understanding that our body is not separate from our spiritual practice. It is the primary vehicle through which our intentions become manifest reality. A mind cultivating peace cannot inhabit a body engaged in acts of harm. Right action is the practice of embodying our ethics, of making our every deed a testament to our commitment to compassion and wisdom. It is the process of building a life of profound integrity, from the inside out. The traditional framework for cultivating right action is a set of 5 guidelines for skillful living, known as the 5 precepts. These are not rigid commandments handed down from on high, to be followed out of fear or obligation. They are better understood as training principles, vows that we voluntarily and joyfully take upon ourselves for our own protection and for the well-being of all. They are a profound act of kindness, a gift of safety that we offer to the world. When we live by these principles, we are implicitly telling every being we meet, "From me, you have nothing to fear." This inner and outer security creates the stable ground upon which deeper meditation can flourish. The first precept is to undertake the training of abstaining from taking life. On its most basic level, this is a vow not to kill another human being, but its spirit extends much further. It is the cultivation of a reverence for all life, a recognition of the precious, fragile nature of existence in all its forms. It encourages us to be a protector, not a destroyer. In a modern context, this principle invites us to examine our relationship with the entire web of life. It prompts us to consider the impact of our choices on animals and the environment. It is not about becoming paralyzed by the fact that our existence inevitably causes some harm, but about nurturing a heartfelt intention to minimize that harm wherever possible, to cultivate a gentle presence on this earth. It is the foundation of a compassionate heart. The second precept is to undertake the training of abstaining from taking what is not given. This is the practice of letting go of stealing, of respecting the property and resources of others. Yet again, the principle extends beyond simple theft. It is a commitment to honesty and fairness in all our dealings. It means not exploiting others, not taking advantage of their trust, not seeking personal gain through deceptive means. It is the vow to live with a spirit of contentment and generosity rather than one of grasping and lack. When we truly feel we have enough, the impulse to take from others simply falls away. This precept fosters a society built on trust, where we can feel secure that our well-being and possessions will not be threatened by the greed of others. It frees the mind from the anxieties of covetousness and the guilt of dishonesty. The third precept is to undertake the training of abstaining from sexual misconduct. In a world of confusing and often harmful messages about sexuality, this principle offers a clear and compassionate guide. It is not a call for prudishness or the denial of our natural human sexuality. It is a call to bring mindfulness and care into our most intimate relationships. Sexual misconduct is defined as any sexual act that causes harm to oneself or to others. This includes any form of coercion, exploitation, or deceit. It is about honoring our commitments and the commitments of others. It is the practice of ensuring that our sexual expression is a source of genuine connection, mutual respect, and well-being, rather than a cause of suffering, betrayal, and broken trust. It invites us to treat others not as objects for our gratification, but as sentient beings worthy of dignity and kindness. The fourth precept, which we have explored as the foundation of right speech, is to abstain from false speech. Its inclusion here, in the context of right action, reminds us that speaking is a physical act, and that our words and deeds are inextricably linked in creating our karmic footprint. The fifth and final precept is to undertake the training of abstaining from intoxicants that lead to heedlessness. This is a vow to avoid alcohol and recreational drugs that cloud the mind and impair our judgment. It is crucial to understand that the rationale here is not moralistic, but deeply practical. The path of awakening is a path of cultivating mindfulness, clarity, and awareness. Intoxicants are the direct enemy of this clarity. They promote heedlessness, or appamada. When our mind is clouded and heedless, we are far more likely to break all the other precepts. We might say things we regret, act on harmful impulses, and cause immense suffering to ourselves and others. This precept is a vow to protect our most precious asset, our conscious, aware mind. It is a commitment to meeting life with our full faculties, to being present for its joys and sorrows without needing to numb or escape them. These 5 precepts taken together form a comprehensive guide to ethical action. They are the guardrails that keep us on the middle path. They are not meant to be a source of guilt, but a source of joy. There is a profound sense of lightness and freedom that comes from living a life of harmlessness, a life where we have nothing to hide and nothing to regret. This outer peace becomes the fertile soil for a deep and unshakable inner peace. This commitment to ethical action naturally extends into the area of our lives where we spend the majority of our waking hours, our work. Rightlyhood, or samma ajiva, is the practice of applying the principles of right action to how we earn our living. It is the recognition that our work is one of the most powerful ways we impact the world, for good or for ill. It is impossible to cultivate a peaceful mind from Monday to Friday if our daily work actively contributes to the suffering of others on the weekend. Classically, the Buddha identified 5 types of livelihood that are to be avoided because they are fundamentally based on causing harm. Dealing in weapons, which facilitate violence. Dealing in human beings, such as through slavery or human trafficking. Dealing in meat, which requires the killing of sentient beings. Dealing in poisons, which are intended to harm or kill. And dealing in intoxicants, which promote heedlessness. In our complex global economy, we can expand on this spirit of inquiry to ask ourselves profound questions about our own work. Does my work depend on or contribute to the exploitation of people or the degradation of the natural world? Does my company produce goods or services that fuel addiction, greed, or delusion? Does my marketing rely on creating a sense of inadequacy in people so they will buy our products? Does our business model prioritize profit above all else, even at the cost of human well-being and environmental health? These can be deeply uncomfortable questions. The path is not asking us to all quit our jobs and become organic farmers or social workers overnight. It is a middle path that acknowledges the real-world pressures of supporting ourselves and our families. The practice begins with honest inquiry. It is about bringing mindfulness and ethical awareness into our work, whatever it may be. Perhaps it means we advocate for more ethical practices within our company. Perhaps it means we treat our colleagues and customers with greater kindness and integrity. Perhaps it means we consciously begin to shift our career path, over time, toward work that feels more aligned with our deepest values. The goal is to reduce the inner conflict, the cognitive dissonance, that arises when we try to compartmentalize our spiritual life from our professional life. There is a wonderful story from the ancient texts about a man named Anathapindika, who was one of the wealthiest merchants and bankers of his time. He became a devoted student of the Buddha, but he did not renounce his business. Instead, he became a living embodiment of rightlyhood. He was known for his absolute integrity in business dealings. He treated his employees with respect and paid them fairly. And he used his great wealth not for his own lavish indulgence, but as a force for immense good. He was the greatest patron and benefactor of the Buddha's community, and he gave generously to the poor and destitute. Anathapindika's life is a powerful testament that a worldly life of commerce and a deep spiritual life are not mutually exclusive. He demonstrates that success can be integrated with ethics, and that prosperity can be a powerful tool for compassion when guided by right view and right intention. Ultimately, right action and rightlyhood are about creating a life of coherence, a life where our inner values and our outer behavior are in beautiful harmony. When our actions in the world are rooted in harmlessness and our work contributes to well-being, we remove the primary external causes of agitation and remorse. We create a life of peace, integrity, and self-respect. This foundation of ethical living, or sila, is absolutely essential. It is the solid, stable ground upon which we can build the next great structure of the path. But building and maintaining this ethical life requires energy, perseverance, and a disciplined mind. We must now turn our attention inward to learn how to cultivate the focus and strength needed to stay the course. This brings us to the second great division of the path, the training in mental discipline, and its first vital component, right effort. Having established a life of integrity through the practice of right speech, right action, and rightlyhood, we create a precious gift for ourselves, a space of outer peace and a clear conscience. This foundational training, known as sila, builds a seawall that protects us from the most turbulent waves of worldly conflict and inner remorse. Now, with this newfound stability, the path invites us to turn our gaze inward. We move from the world of outer conduct to the vast, intricate, and often chaotic landscape of the mind itself. This is the beginning of the second great division of the path, the training in mental discipline, or samadhi. And the engine that drives this entire inner journey, the vital energy that transforms mere intention into tangible progress, is the fifth path factor, right effort, or sama vayama. Without effort, the most sublime view is just a postcard, and the most noble intention is just a pleasant daydream. Effort is what makes the path walk. In our modern culture, effort is a loaded word. We associate it with the hustle and grind mentality, with straining, with forcing, with the tense belief that progress only comes through struggle and pain. We are taught to push through, to power on, to conquer obstacles with sheer force of will. But this is not the kind of effort the Buddha was talking about. Right effort is not about gritting your teeth and trying harder in a way that creates more tension. The Pali word vayama conveys a sense of diligent perseverance, of sustained energy, not of stressful striving. It is, once again, an invitation to the middle path. If we apply too much tense, forceful effort in our practice, our mind becomes agitated and restless, like a sitar string pulled too tight. We burn out and give up. If we apply too little effort, the mind becomes lazy, dull, and lost in daydreams, like a sitar string that is too loose. Right effort is the skillful, joyful, and balanced application of energy. It is the just right tuning that allows the beautiful music of a calm and clear mind to emerge naturally, without force and without slackness. It is the sustainable energy that can carry us for the entire length of the journey. So, what does this skillful effort look like in practice? The Buddha laid it out as a simple yet comprehensive four-part strategy for mental cultivation. We can think of it as a master gardener's guide to tending the landscape of the mind. The first of these is the effort to prevent unwholesome states from arising. A wise gardener, before planting, inspects their seeds. They know which seeds will grow into nourishing vegetables and beautiful flowers, and which will grow into invasive, choking weeds. They are careful not to sow the seeds of weeds. In the same way, we learn to guard the gateways of our senses. We know from experience that certain situations, certain types of entertainment, certain conversations, or certain online environments are toxic for our minds. They reliably trigger feelings of anger, greed, envy, or despair. The effort of prevention is the wisdom to recognize this and to skillfully choose not to engage. It is not about hiding from the world in fear, but about lovingly protecting our own mental well-being. It is the proactive effort to not plant the seeds of suffering in the first place. But of course, our mental garden is already full of weed seeds from a lifetime of habitual thinking. So, the second practice is the effort to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. No matter how vigilant we are, weeds will sprout. Unwholesome thoughts and emotions, a flash of rage, a surge of jealousy, a wave of craving will inevitably appear in the mind. The unskillful approach is either to violently suppress them, pushing them down out of sight where they often grow stronger in the dark, or to indulge them, watering the weed by replaying the angry story over and over in our head. Right effort offers a middle way. When a weed appears, the skillful gardener does not ignore it, nor do they frantically pour poison all over the garden. They mindfully acknowledge it. Ah, here is anger, and then gently, patiently, they uproot it. In mental terms, this means we meet the unwholesome state with non-judgmental awareness, and then we gently but firmly withdraw our attention from it, placing it on something more wholesome, like the physical sensation of our breath. We simply refuse to offer the weed our energy, and without that energy, it withers and dies on its own. The third practice is the joyful and creative side of the work, the effort to cultivate wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the gardener's act of intentionally sowing the seeds of flowers and vegetables. It is the active, conscious decision to introduce and nurture positive qualities in the mind. We can make a deliberate effort to think thoughts of loving kindness, wishing ourselves and others well. We can practice gratitude, intentionally calling to mind the things we are thankful for, no matter how small. We can cultivate compassion by reflecting on the suffering of others and wishing for its end. We can bring to mind thoughts of generosity and forgiveness. This is not about papering over our difficulties with naive positive thinking. It is about consciously choosing which mental muscles to exercise. The more we intentionally cultivate these wholesome states, the more familiar the mind becomes with them. They begin to grow, to blossom, and to eventually become the default landscape of our inner world. Finally, the fourth practice is the effort to maintain wholesome states that have already arisen. When the gardener's flowers begin to bloom, their work is not over. They must continue to water them, protect them from pests, and give them sunlight. Similarly, when a wholesome state arises in our meditation, or our daily life, a moment of profound peace, a feeling of open-hearted love, a flash of clarifying insight, we must learn to nurture it. The tendency of the distracted mind is to have a fleeting positive experience and then immediately move on to the next thing. Right effort here means learning to savor the wholesome. We allow the feeling of peace to really sink in. We let the warmth of compassion permeate our body. We return our attention to it again and again, allowing it to take deeper root in our nervous system. By doing so, we help these beautiful states to grow from fleeting visitors into abiding residents of our heart and mind. This fourfold practice might sound like a great deal of hard work, and indeed, it requires diligence. But the effort itself can, and should, become a source of joy. The gardener does not typically see their work as a grim and joyless chore. They take a deep satisfaction in tending their soil, in seeing the first shoots emerge, in watching their plants grow strong and healthy. In the same way, as we begin to see the tangible results of our inner gardening, a little more peace, a little less anger, a little more compassion, the effort itself becomes infused with a joyful energy. We become eager to engage in the practice that brings such freedom. There may be times, however, when our progress seems impossibly slow. Our old ingrained habits of negativity can seem as solid and immovable as a mountain. In these moments, it is helpful to remember the parable of the water drop and the stone. Imagine a large, granite boulder sitting beneath a tiny, gentle trickle of water. For days, for weeks, for years, nothing seems to be happening. The effort of the water seems futile against the immense solidity of the stone. An outside observer would likely give up, concluding the task is impossible. But if that gentle drop of water continues to fall, day after day, year after year, with unwavering persistence, eventually it will wear a hole right through the toughest stone. Our deeply conditioned habits of mind are like that stone. Our moment-to-moment efforts to be mindful, to be kind, to let go, can feel as small and insignificant as a single drop of water. But right effort is the understanding that it is not one single heroic act that transforms us. It is the steady, patient, and relentless application of gentle effort that wears away the stone of our suffering. It is the trust in the power of persistence. Right effort is the wise, balanced, and courageous energy that fuels our entire inner journey. It is the engine of our practice. But an engine, no matter how powerful, is useless without a steering wheel and a clear view of the road ahead. Effort must be guided by awareness. We need to know, in any given moment, what is actually happening in our minds so that we can know which of the four efforts to apply. We need a bright, steady light that illuminates the present moment, revealing the weeds and the flowers with perfect clarity. This need for clear, moment-to-moment seeing brings us to the very heart of the practice of mental discipline and to the most famous and essential factor on the entire path, right mindfulness. Having awakened the wise and balanced energy of right effort, we have an engine to power our journey. But an engine alone is not enough. We need a brilliant, steady headlight to illuminate the path before us, moment by moment. That headlight is right mindfulness, or samasati. This factor is the very heart of the entire path, the central pillar upon which all other aspects of wisdom and conduct are supported. It is the art and practice of waking up to our own lives. In its simplest terms, mindfulness is the ability to know what you are doing as you are doing it, and to know what you are feeling as you are feeling it. It is the gentle but firm capacity to bring our full attention to the present moment on purpose, without the distorting filter of judgment. This may sound simple, but it is the most revolutionary skill we can cultivate. It is the key that unlocks the prison of our own reactive conditioning. Perhaps the greatest misconception about mindfulness, especially in the West, is that it is a technique to empty the mind or to stop our thoughts. This is not the case. The mind produces thoughts as naturally as the heart beats. To try and force them to stop is to engage in a frustrating and unwinnable war against ourselves. The practice of mindfulness is not about stopping our thoughts. It is about changing our relationship to them. It is about moving from being a passenger tossed about in the turbulent river of our thinking to being a calm observer, sitting peacefully on the riverbank, watching the currents of thought flow by without being swept away. To guide us in this practice, the Buddha offered a comprehensive training system known as the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness. This is a guided tour of our own inner landscape, a step-by-step method for exploring the entirety of our human experience with clarity and kindness. The first foundation, and the essential anchor for our practice, is mindfulness of the body. The body is our greatest teacher of presence, because it is always, unfailingly, in the here and now. You cannot breathe in the past, nor can you feel your feet on the floor in the future. The most common way to practice this is by bringing gentle, curious attention to the physical sensations of the breath, not controlling the breath or judging it, but simply feeling the raw data of it, the subtle rise and fall of the abdomen, the coolness of the air entering the nostrils, the warmth of the air leaving. This breath becomes our anchor, a safe harbor we can return to whenever the mind is lost in storms of thought. This practice extends beyond formal meditation. It is mindfulness of the body as we walk, feeling the contact of each foot with the ground. It is mindfulness of eating, truly tasting our food rather than consuming it on autopilot. It is the simple act of inhabiting our own physical form, which for many of us is a profoundly new and grounding experience. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings, or more accurately, of feeling tones. This is a subtle and powerful practice. Buddhist psychology teaches that every single one of our experiences, from the most dramatic to the most mundane, is accompanied by a subtle feeling tone. This tone can be categorized in one of 3 ways: pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Our entire conditioned life is a frantic, unconscious dance driven by these tones. We spend our lives trying to grasp and prolong the pleasant, to resist and destroy the unpleasant, and to ignore the neutral, seeking out more stimulation. The practice of mindfulness of feeling is revolutionary. It teaches us to simply notice these tones as they arise, without getting hooked. When a difficult emotion appears, we can note the unpleasant feeling in the body. When a joyful moment occurs, we can note the pleasant feeling. When nothing particular is happening, we can note neutral. By doing this, we begin to see that these feeling tones are just impersonal, fleeting events in the mind and body. They are not commands. The unpleasant feeling does not have to trigger aversion. The pleasant feeling does not have to trigger craving. By observing them with mindfulness, we interrupt the automatic chain reaction that leads to suffering. We are stepping off the hedonic treadmill. The third foundation is mindfulness of the mind, or consciousness itself. Here, we go a level deeper. We begin to observe the very state and quality of the mind in any given moment. Is the mind contracted or spacious? Is it agitated or calm? Is it filled with greed or with generosity? Is it possessed by anger or imbued with kindness? The practice is to simply and gently name what is present without judgment. The crucial shift here is one of language and identity. Instead of saying, "I am angry," we learn to observe, the mind is experiencing anger. Instead of, "I am distracted," we note, there is distraction present in the mind. This may seem like a small semantic trick, but its effect is profoundly liberating. It creates a space between our sense of self and our temporary mental states. We begin to realize that we are not the anger, the sadness, or the joy. We are the spacious, loving awareness that can witness all of these states as they come and go, like weather patterns passing through the vast sky of the mind. The fourth and most subtle foundation is mindfulness of Dhammas, which can be understood as mindfulness of mental objects or the patterns of experience. This involves looking at our inner world through the clarifying lens of the Buddha's teachings. One of the most practical ways to do this is to observe the presence or absence of what are called the 5 hindrances. These are 5 specific mental states that cloud our clarity and prevent our peace: sensual desire, ill will, sloth and dullness, restlessness and worry, and skeptical doubt. The practice here is diagnostic. When we sit to meditate and find our mind is not settling, we can ask, is one of the hindrances present? We might notice, there is restlessness here, or there is a strong desire for something else. By simply naming the hindrance, we take away its power. We see it not as a personal failure, but as an impersonal, common pattern of the mind. We also make an effort to notice when the hindrances are absent, appreciating the moments of clarity and peace. This gives us a precise and skillful way to understand and work with the specific challenges of our own mind. To grasp the spirit of this entire fourfold practice, the image of a wise gatekeeper is perfect. Imagine your mind as a great city with a single gate. Your practice is to become the gatekeeper. The gatekeeper's job is not to fight with the visitors, nor is it to cling to them and beg them to stay. It is not to judge the visitors as good or bad. The gatekeeper's sole responsibility is to be aware, to notice everyone who enters and everyone who leaves the city. A thought of the past arrives. The gatekeeper notes, a memory is entering. A feeling of joy arises. The gatekeeper notes, joy is present. A plan for the future appears. Planning is present. An angry impulse comes. Anger is here. The gatekeeper remains at the post, calm and observant. By taking up this role, we cease to identify with the endless stream of visitors. We are not the angry thought. We are not the fleeting joy. We are not the anxious plan. We are the calm, steady, knowing presence of the gatekeeper who sees it all. In this seeing, there is freedom. This practice, cultivated on a meditation cushion, has a radical impact on our daily lives. The Austrian psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl famously wrote, "Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Mindfulness is the tool that allows us to find and inhabit that space. The critical email from your boss is the stimulus. The automatic, unmindful reaction might be a surge of defensive anger, and a hastily typed, aggressive reply the second arrow. But with mindfulness, a space opens up. The email arrives. You notice the unpleasant feeling in your chest. You notice the angry thoughts arising in your mind. Because you notice them, you are not them. You are the observer. And in that space of observation, you have a choice. You can still choose to send the angry email, but it is now a conscious choice, not a blind reaction. Or you can choose to breathe, to wait, to understand, and to reply with skill, wisdom, and kindness. This is where the practice leaves the cushion and changes the world. It is the practical magic of mindfulness. Right, mindfulness is the foundational skill of bringing clear, kind attention to the raw data of our lives. It is the light that illuminates the path, showing us where we are and what is happening, free from the distortions of our hopes and fears. But what happens when this light, this mindful awareness, becomes stable, strong, and unwavering? What happens when the mind is no longer jumping restlessly from one object to another, but can rest with collected, unified clarity upon a single point. This sustained and powerful awareness is the final factor in the training of mental discipline. It is the culmination of our effort and mindfulness. It is the deep and clarifying state of right concentration. When the steady energy of right effort is guided by the clear light of right mindfulness, an extraordinary transformation begins to occur. The mind, which was once a turbulent ocean, whipped into a frenzy by the winds of thought and emotion, starts to grow calm. The frantic, scattered nature of our attention begins to coalesce. This process of unification, of gathering the mind into a state of serene, powerful one-pointedness, is the eighth factor of the path. It is right concentration, or samma samadhi. This is the culmination of the training in mental discipline, the fruit that grows from the dedicated practice of the preceding steps. It is the art of bringing the mind to a state of profound stillness, not through force, but through a gentle and skillful release of all that disturbs it. To understand the power of concentration, we can think of the mind in terms of light. For most of us, our everyday consciousness is like a common light bulb in a drafty room. Its light is diffused, scattered, and constantly flickering. It provides a general illumination, enough to get by, but it lacks intensity and focus. It cannot penetrate deeply into anything. This is the unconcentrated mind, jumping from a memory of the past to a worry about the future, from a distracting sound to a physical itch, never resting anywhere for more than a moment. Its energy is dissipated and weak. Right concentration is the practice of transforming this flickering light bulb into a coherent, powerful laser beam. A laser is simply light that has been unified, where all the waves are moving together in perfect harmony. This unified beam of light has the power to cut through the hardest steel. In the same way, a concentrated mind, unified and harmonized, has the power to cut through the most deeply ingrained delusions and to illuminate the most subtle truths of our existence. It is crucial to understand that samma samadhi, or right concentration, is not just any kind of intense focus. A sniper peering through a rifle scope has a powerful concentration. A cat stalking a bird has an unwavering focus. A day trader staring at a screen is deeply absorbed. But these are not right concentration. Their focus is rooted in an unwholesome intention to harm, to hunt, to gain. Right concentration is right because it is wholesome. It is built upon the foundation of the preceding path factors. It is supported by a life of ethical conduct, guided by a wise and compassionate intention, and nurtured by mindful effort. It is a concentration that leads not to worldly gain or harm, but to inner peace and liberation. How, then, do we cultivate this state? The process is less about doing and more about allowing. It is the natural consequence of creating the right conditions. Imagine a jar of muddy water. If you want the water to become clear, you don't need to force the mud to the bottom. In fact, if you try to push the mud down, you will only stir it up more. The wise approach is simply to place the jar on a steady surface, protect it from being shaken, and allow it to be still. Over time, through the simple force of gravity, the mud will naturally settle, leaving the water perfectly clear. Our mind is like this jar of muddy water. The mud is our mental hindrances or desires, aversions, restlessness, dullness, and doubt. Our practice of right effort and right mindfulness is like gently placing the jar on a steady surface. We stop shaking it with our constant reactivity. As we sit with steady, mindful attention, allowing our thoughts and feelings to arise and pass without struggle, the mind naturally begins to settle. The mud of the hindrances sinks to the bottom, and the mind's inherent nature, which is clear, bright, and luminous, is revealed. As this settling process deepens, the meditator may begin to experience states of profound pleasure and peace, known as the jhanas. These meditative absorptions are often described in ways that can make them sound mystical or unattainable, but they can be understood as a natural, neurological progression of deep tranquility. They are the reward, the spa for the mind, that arises when the 5 hindrances have been temporarily abandoned. In the first jhana, the mind becomes unified and filled with a sense of rapture and happiness born of this seclusion. It is a joyful, exhilarating state. As the concentration deepens further into the second jhana, the initial mental activity of thinking fades away, and the rapture and happiness intensify, now born directly from the concentration itself. In the third jhana, the more ecstatic quality of rapture fades, leaving a more subtle, all-pervading happiness and profound equanimity. Finally, in the fourth jhana, even this subtle happiness gives way to a state of pure, unshakable equanimity and mindfulness beyond all pleasure and pain. The mind is perfectly still, utterly clear, like a flawless mirror. It is easy to become attached to these blissful states, and many have mistaken them for the final goal of the path. But the Buddha was clear. The jhanas are not the end of the journey. They are a place of rest, a way to refresh and strengthen the mind. More importantly, they are the whetstone upon which we sharpen the tool of the mind. The true purpose of cultivating such a powerful, purified, and pliant state of concentration is to be able to use it for the work of insight, or vipassana. Think of a woodcutter who wants to fell a great tree. If their axe is dull, they will have to swing with immense, exhausting effort, making very little progress. They will become frustrated and may give up entirely. This is the scattered, unmindful mind trying to understand the deep truths of existence. A wise woodcutter, however, first takes the time to patiently sharpen their axe. This sharpening process might seem like a diversion from the main task, but it is the most crucial preparation. The practice of samadhi, of cultivating concentration, is the sharpening of the axe. Once the axe is razor sharp, the woodcutter can approach the tree, and with a few well-aimed, almost effortless swings, the great tree falls. This is the concentrated mind, turning its focused power to the investigation of reality. With this laser-like, jhanic concentration, we can turn our attention to the nature of our own experience with unprecedented clarity. We can observe a single physical sensation and see, not as a theory, but as a direct, lived reality, its arising, its brief existence, and its passing away. The truth of anicca, impermanence, ceases to be a philosophy and becomes a self-evident fact. We can examine the very nature of what we call a self with such precision that we see it as nothing more than a rapidly changing, interdependent process of physical and mental events. We look for a solid, abiding me at the center of it all, and with this powerful light of concentration, we find nothing there. The liberating truth of anatta, not self, dawns upon the mind. The deep roots of our suffering are clinging to what is impermanent, and our attachment to a non-existent self are severed at their base. Right concentration, therefore, is the culmination of our mental training. It is the gathering of our faculties into a single, potent force. It creates a mind that is not only profoundly peaceful, stable, and joyful, but one that is also the perfect instrument for discovery. It is the state in which the mind becomes both the laboratory and the microscope for investigating the ultimate nature of things. Having forged this powerful tool through the disciplined practice of the path, we are now fully prepared to return to where our journey began, but this time with a new and penetrating light. We are ready to revisit the themes of right view and right intention, not as intellectual concepts to be understood, but as fundamental truths to be realized directly, bringing the entire journey to its magnificent and liberating conclusion in the final training of wisdom. With the mind honed to a razor's edge by the practice of right concentration, we possess a tool of unprecedented power and precision. We are no longer observing the world through a clouded and wavering lens. We have, through our patient training, crafted a microscope capable of looking beyond the surface appearances of things and into their fundamental nature. Now, the path invites us to use this magnificent instrument. We turn this sharpened beam of awareness back upon our own experience, and the first, most profound, and most inescapable truth we encounter is that of anicca. This Pali word is most often translated as impermanence, but its meaning is far more dynamic and radical than a simple poetic acknowledgement that all things must pass. Anicca is the universal law of change, the relentless, moment-to-moment flux that is the very nature of all conditioned existence. It is the realization that the universe is not a collection of solid, static things, but a symphony of interconnected, ever-changing processes. On the surface, we all know that things change. We see the seasons turn. We watch children grow old. We witness empires rise and fall. We accept this on an intellectual level. But our deep, instinctual programming operates on a completely different assumption. We live our lives as if things are stable. We build our careers, our relationships, and our identities on a foundation we assume to be solid ground. We hunt for permanent security in a world where no such thing exists. The practice of insight meditation, fueled by a concentrated mind, is designed to shatter this foundational illusion, not just as a concept, but as a direct, visceral experience. We begin to see that the solid mountain is not solid at all. It is a slow-motion dance of geological uplift and erosion. The sturdy oak table in our room is not a static object. It is a vibrating cloud of atoms, a temporary configuration of energy that is constantly decaying. The very flow of time, which we perceive as a smooth river, is actually a series of discrete moments, each one arising and vanishing in an instant, never to be repeated. This insight becomes truly transformative when we turn the microscope inward. We begin with the body, which feels so solid, so me. With mindful attention, we discover it is nothing but a river of sensations. An itch appears on the cheek, seemingly from nowhere. We observe it. It intensifies, it moves, it fades, and then it is gone. A feeling of warmth spreads through the chest. We watch it. It peaks, and then it recedes. The breath flows in, the breath flows out. Each breath is born, lives a short life, and then dies, making way for the next. The heartbeat, the pulse of blood, the digestion of food the body is a non-stop churning process. It is never the same from one moment to the next. The cells that make up our body today are not the same ones from 7 years ago. The face we see in the mirror is a map of this ceaseless change. To see anicca in the body is to realize we do not inhabit a fixed statue, but a flowing, ever-altering river of life. Then, we turn the light of awareness onto the mind itself, that part of us we most identify as ourself. And here, the truth of impermanence becomes even more dazzlingly obvious. An emotion of joy arises, perhaps triggered by a happy memory. It fills the mind, coloring our entire perception of the world. It feels wonderful, and we instinctively want to hold on to it, to make it our permanent home. But if we watch it closely, with the power of our concentration, we see that it has no substance. It is a flickering energy that shifts, wavers, and eventually, inevitably, dissolves. Then, perhaps, a thought of anger flashes into the mind, triggered by a perceived slight. It feels so solid, so justified, so real. It consumes us, demanding action. But again, if we can resist the urge to get swept away and simply observe it, we see that it too is just a temporary cloud passing through the vast sky of the mind. It loses its heat, its form, and dissipates. Memories, plans, daydreams, moments of clarity, moments of confusion. Our inner world is a relentless waterfall of mental events, each one arising and ceasing in the blink of an eye. The reason this insight is so critical, so central to our liberation, is because it directly reveals the root mechanism of our suffering. We suffer not because things change, but because we desperately, futilely, try to stop them from changing. Our suffering is the friction generated by our resistance to the fundamental law of the universe. We grasp at pleasant experiences, trying to nail them down, and we suffer when they slip through our fingers. We push away unpleasant experiences, trying to build a fortress against them, and we suffer when they inevitably breach our walls. We construct a solid, permanent idea of me from these fleeting thoughts and feelings, and then we live in a constant state of anxiety, trying to defend and promote this imaginary entity. Our entire life of struggle is a war against the truth of anicca, a war we can never, ever win. The great teaching story of Kisa Gotami illustrates this with heartbreaking beauty. Kisa Gotami was a young woman whose infant son died. Mad with grief, she refused to accept his death. Clutching his small body, she went from house to house, from teacher to teacher, begging for a medicine that could bring him back to life. Some mocked her, others pitied her, until finally, a wise man told her to go see the Buddha. The Buddha listened to her plea with immense compassion and told her he could help. He asked her to go into the village and bring him back a single mustard seed, but with one condition. The seed had to come from a house where no one had ever died. Filled with a desperate hope, Kisa Gotami went from door to door. At the first house, they had mustard seeds, but they told her, "The living are few, but the dead are many. We lost a parent here last year." At the next house, they told her of a spouse who had passed. At every single door, she heard the same story of loss. As the day wore on, the truth began to dawn on her, not as a harsh lesson, but as a shared, universal reality. Her personal, unbearable grief began to dissolve into a deep, compassionate understanding of the human condition. She realized that death was not a unique tragedy that had befallen only her. It was the natural, inescapable companion to life. She returned to the Buddha without the mustard seed, her heart transformed. She had not found a cure for death, but she had found the cure for her suffering about death, the acceptance of impermanent nature of life. When we truly begin to absorb this wisdom, it doesn't lead to a feeling of pessimistic resignation. It leads to a profound and joyous liberation. When we know that even the most blissful states are temporary, we stop clinging to them. This allows us to participate in them more fully, to savor them with a light and grateful heart, without the underlying fear of their departure. When we know that even the most painful emotions are impermanent, we stop fighting them with such terror. We find the courage to sit with our sorrow or our fear, knowing that this too shall pass. This allows the pain to flow through us and release its energy, rather than getting stuck and turning into long-term trauma. The second arrow of our own making loses its power. Most beautifully, the deep acceptance of anicca consecrates the present moment. If this moment, with all its sights, sounds, and feelings, will never exist again in all of eternity, it becomes infinitely precious. We stop living in the past, which is gone forever, and we stop living for the future, which is an uncertain dream. We learn to arrive, fully, in the only reality we ever have, the here and now. We learn to drink our tea, truly tasting it. We learn to listen to a friend, truly hearing them. We learn to feel the sun on our skin, truly appreciating its warmth. The steady, clear-eyed observation of impermanence inevitably leads to the next, even more profound question. As we watch this endless river of changing sensations, thoughts, and emotions flow by, a question naturally arises: who is the one watching? If everything I experience is in flux, where is the permanent, unchanging I at the center of it all? This inquiry into the nature of the observer, this deep questioning of the very foundation of our identity, leads us directly to the next great mark of existence, the most challenging and liberating insight of all, the truth of anatta, or not self. Having followed the ever-changing river of our experience to its source, we arrive at the final, most profound, and most challenging object of investigation. We have seen with the clarity of our concentrated mind that our body is a process, our feelings are fleeting, and our thoughts are like clouds passing in the sky. The truth of impermanence, anicca, has revealed that nothing we experience is solid or lasting. This raises the ultimate question: who then is the one having this experience? If everything I perceive is in constant flux, what about the perceiver? What is this I that sits at the center of my universe? this self that I have spent my entire life protecting, promoting, and identifying with. The path of wisdom now invites us to turn the full power of our sharpened awareness onto this final and most sacred illusion, the illusion of a solid, separate, and permanent self. This is the teaching of anatta, or not self, an insight so radical it has the power to dismantle the very foundation of our suffering. Let us be clear from the start. The teaching of not self is not a nihilistic declaration that you do not exist or that life is meaningless. It is not an erasure, but an illumination. It does not seek to prove that you are nothing, but rather to reveal the astonishing and liberating truth of how you exist, not as a fixed and isolated noun, but as a dynamic, flowing, and interconnected verb. It is a shift in perspective from seeing yourself as a separate statue in the museum of life, to realizing you are a unique and beautiful wave in the vast ocean of existence. To investigate this, the Buddha provided a brilliant analytical framework. He taught that what we conventionally call a person or a self is in reality a temporary coalition of 5 distinct processes. These are the 5 aggregates, or skandhas. They are the heaps of experience that we bundle together and mislabel as me. The first is the aggregate of form. This is the physical body, with all its parts and sensations. We have already seen, through the lens of anicca, that the body is an ever-changing process. Is this impermanent collection of flesh and bone the true, abiding you? The second is the aggregate of feeling. This includes all our pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral feeling tones. These feelings are like weather, constantly shifting. Are you the fleeting pleasure? Are you the transient pain? Or are they just events passing through awareness? The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It sees a shape and color and says, tree. It hears a tone of voice and labels it angry. This labeling process is conditioned by our past, our culture, and our language. Is this fallible, conditioned labeling function the real you? The fourth, and perhaps most encompassing, aggregate is mental formations. This vast category includes all our volitional activities, our thoughts, intentions, opinions, beliefs, moods, and mental habits. This is the ceaseless chatter of the mind, the inner narrator telling the story of me. But we have seen that thoughts are as insubstantial as the wind. Are you these fleeting opinions? Are you the reactive anger or the passing desire? Or are they just impersonal patterns of mental energy? Finally, there is the fifth aggregate, consciousness. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the bare awareness that arises when a sense organ connects with a sense object. Eye consciousness arises when the eye meets a form. Ear consciousness arises when the ear meets a sound. This consciousness is not a monolithic, ever-present entity. It is dependent on conditions, flickering in and out of existence, moment by moment. Is this dependent, flickering awareness the permanent soul you've been looking for? The conclusion of this profound investigation is that when we look for a solid, independent self in any of these 5 heaps of experience, we cannot find one. And there is nothing we can point to as a self that exists outside of these 5 processes. This can be a difficult concept to grasp, so the ancient texts offer a beautifully clear parable. The Greek-born King Milinda, a man of keen intellect, approached the Buddhist sage Nagasena to challenge him on this very teaching. The king began, "Venerable sir, what is your name? By what name are you known?" After Nagasena answered, the king triumphantly replied, "Then who is this Nagasena? Is it your hair, your body, your feelings, your thoughts?" He went through all the aggregates, and Nagasena answered no to each. Nagasena then smiled and turned the question back on the king, who had arrived in a magnificent chariot. "Your Majesty," Nagasena began, "you have come in a chariot. What is this chariot? Is the pole the chariot?" "No, venerable sir," replied the king. "Are the wheels the chariot, the axle, the frame, the reins?" To each question, The king answered no. Nagasena then declared, "Then, your majesty, I see no chariot at all." The king was forced to admit that chariot is simply a convenient name, a conventional designation one gives to the specific arrangement of the pole, wheels, axle, and frame. It has no essential, independent existence apart from its constituent parts. When you disassemble the parts, the chariot vanishes. Nagasena then delivered the final insight. "In just the same way, your majesty, Nagasena is but a conventional name for this particular arrangement of body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. In the ultimate sense, there is no permanent person to be found." This insight, far from being terrifying, is the gateway to profound freedom. When the belief in a separate self begins to dissolve, the very root of our suffering begins to wither. Think of the most painful emotions: pride, jealousy, crippling social anxiety, deep-seated fear, righteous anger. What do they all have in common? They are all based on the project of defending, maintaining, and enhancing the illusion of me. Pride is the feeling of a superior me. Jealousy is the pain of a me that feels it lacks what another me has. Anxiety is the fear that I will be judged or harmed. When we see that this I is not a solid entity, but a fluid and interconnected process, the fuel for these fires is removed. The burden of having to be somebody is lifted. We can hold our life, our successes, and our failures with a newfound lightness. We are no longer a fragile, isolated ego at war with the world. We are a seamless manifestation of the world. We understand that we are not a drop in the ocean, but the entire ocean in a drop. This does not lead to passivity or a lack of responsibility. In fact, it leads to a deeper, more profound sense of connection and accountability. Seeing through the illusion of a separate self reveals the truth of dependent origination, the understanding that nothing exists in isolation. Everything arises in dependence upon other factors. We are inextricably linked to each other and to our environment. My actions have consequences that ripple out through this interconnected web, just as I am shaped by the ripples created by others. This seeing is the true foundation of ethics and compassion. The deconstruction of the self is the final, decisive cut that severs the root of dukkha. It is the ultimate shift in perspective, from the cramped, defensive prison of I, me, and mine to the vast, open, and boundless landscape of interconnected being. When the heart is no longer frantically preoccupied with its own survival and its own petty dramas, it becomes available to the world in a way it never could before. It has the space, the courage, and the freedom to feel a selfless, unconditional, and limitless love for all that lives. This profound opening of the heart is the natural flowering of wisdom. It is the beginning of the path of boundless compassion, starting with the cultivation of universal, loving kindness, or metta. The profound, world-shattering insight of not-self, anatta, is like a controlled demolition of a prison. The walls of the small, separate ego, which we thought were keeping us safe, but were in fact keeping us confined, come crumbling down. In the immediate aftermath, there can be a sense of vast, open, and perhaps even disorienting space. What do we build in its place? If the old life was organized around the principle of I, me, and mine, what becomes the new organizing principle? The wisdom of the path reveals that the natural, spontaneous expression of a mind freed from the shackles of self is a boundless, unconditional love. When the heart is no longer consumed with defending its own territory, it discovers that its true nature is to be open to the entire world. This opening of the heart is not left to chance. It is actively cultivated through the practice of metta, or loving kindness. Metta is the positive, radiant counterpart to the wisdom of emptiness. It is how we learn to live in the beautiful, interconnected reality that our insight has revealed. It is vital to understand that metta is fundamentally different from the kinds of love we are most familiar with in Western culture. It is not the possessive, conditional, and often painful attachment of romantic love. It is not the transactional affection we feel for those who are nice to us or who please us. Metta is a universal, impartial, and unconditional goodwill. It is the sincere, heartfelt wish for all beings, without exception, to be happy and to be free from the causes of unhappiness. The most powerful analogy for metta is the sun. The sun does not choose who receives its light and warmth. It does not shine only on the beautiful gardens and withhold its rays from the garbage dumps. It does not shine only on the virtuous and shun the wicked. It radiates its life-giving energy everywhere, impartially, generously, and constantly. To practice metta is to learn how to cultivate this inner sun, to radiate a steady warmth from our own hearts toward ourselves and all of life. It is the ultimate high-frequency state, the direct antidote to the poison of hatred, fear, anger, and alienation. The practice of metta meditation is a systematic training of the heart, a process of expanding our capacity for love in ever-widening circles. And the place where this radical practice must always begin is the one place we so often overlook, with ourselves. For many of us, this is the most difficult step. Our minds are filled with a harsh inner critic that constantly reminds us of our flaws and failings. The idea of offering kindness to ourselves can feel awkward, undeserved, or even selfish. But the wisdom of the path is adamant on this point. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot offer genuine, sustainable kindness to others if your own heart is a battlefield of self-recrimination. It is like the safety instruction on an airplane. You must put on your own oxygen mask first before assisting others. Loving kindness for oneself is not selfish. It is the necessary foundation for all true generosity and compassion. The practice is simple and direct. We sit quietly and gently repeat a series of phrases directed toward our own being. Traditional phrases include, "May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be safe. May I live with ease." We are not trying to force a feeling, but simply to plant a seed. We are offering ourselves the same gentle well-wishing that we would offer to a beloved friend. Even if we feel resistance, we persist gently, understanding that for many of us, we are working to undo a lifetime of conditioning and self-criticism. We are learning to become our own best friend. Once we have established a baseline of warmth and friendliness toward ourselves, we begin to expand the circle. We next bring to mind a benefactor or a dearly loved friend, someone for whom it is very easy to feel love and appreciation. We hold their image in our mind and radiate the same phrases toward them. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be safe. May you live with ease. The purpose here is to allow the feeling of metta to flow freely and strongly, to experience its warmth and joy without obstruction. After letting the heart become saturated with this positive feeling, we move to the next circle, a neutral person. We bring to mind someone we see regularly but have no strong feelings about: a cashier at the grocery store, a neighbor we barely know, a coworker in another department. By directing our goodwill toward them, we begin to challenge our habit of indifference. We start to see the humanity in those who exist on the periphery of our lives, recognizing that they, too, wish to be happy, just as we do. This practice breaks down the artificial walls between those who matter to us and those who do not. The next stage is the most challenging and transformative. We are invited to bring to mind a difficult person, someone who has hurt us, angered us, or with whom we have conflict. The practice here requires great skill and is not to be forced. The point is not to condone their harmful actions or to pretend what happened was okay. The point is a profound act of self-liberation. We recognize that holding on to our anger and hatred is a poison that harms us far more than it harms them. We also recognize that this person, in their own way, is suffering. Happy, peaceful people do not cause harm. Their harmful actions come from their own greed, fear, and delusion. With this wisdom, we can gently, tentatively, begin to wish for them to be free from that suffering. May you be happy, in this context, becomes a radical wish. May you find the sources of true happiness so that you no longer have the need to cause harm to me or anyone else. This is the practice that dissolves the deepest knots of resentment in our own hearts. Finally, having worked through these specific categories, we allow our metta to become boundless. We radiate it outward in all directions, to the north, south, east, and west, above and below. We extend it to all humans, friends and enemies alike. We extend it to all animals, all insects, all creatures seen and unseen. We extend it to all beings in all realms of existence. May all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings be safe. May all beings live with ease. In this final stage, the heart transcends all barriers of us and them, and we experience our profound kinship with the whole of life. The seemingly gentle sentiment of metta is, in fact, the most powerful and unconquerable force in the universe. This is beautifully illustrated in the story of the Buddha and the raging elephant, Nalagiri. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, in an attempt to assassinate him, got the royal elephant keepers to intoxicate Nalagiri, a known ferocious beast, and unleash him on the path where the Buddha was walking. As the elephant charged, screaming and destroying everything in its path, people fled in terror. The Buddha's own disciples begged him to run, but the Buddha stood his ground, perfectly calm. He did not prepare to fight or use any supernatural power. He simply looked at the enraged animal and radiated a powerful, unwavering field of pure metta. As the elephant entered this field of loving kindness, a miracle occurred. Its pace slowed, its rage subsided, its eyes softened. It became completely calm, walked peacefully to the Buddha, knelt down, and allowed the master to gently stroke its forehead. This story serves as a powerful metaphor. Metta has the power to tame the raging elephants in our own lives, the anger of another person, the violence in the world, and most importantly, the ferocious elephant of our own inner rage, fear, and hatred. It is the ultimate shield and the ultimate healing balm. Metta is the heart's joyful yes to the wisdom of our interconnectedness. It is the practice that dissolves our sense of alienation and fills the space left by the ego with a radiant warmth and boundless affection for all that is. But what happens when this universal goodwill, this sincere wish for all beings to be happy, comes into direct contact with the reality of specific suffering? The heart's response deepens, it focuses, it takes on a new quality. The gentle, all-encompassing sunshine of metta, when it shines upon a being who is in pain, transforms into the focused, healing, and trembling warmth of compassion, or karuna. If metta, loving kindness, is the sun that radiates its warmth impartially upon the entire world, then karuna, or compassion, is what happens when that sunlight falls upon a patch of frozen ground. The light does not turn away, its nature is to shine. But in meeting the coldness, its warmth takes on a new and focused purpose, to thaw, to soften, to bring life back to what is hard and suffering. In the same way, when the open, loving heart cultivated through metta encounters the raw, undeniable reality of pain in another being or in ourselves, it does not recoil. The heart's innate wish for happiness trembles in the face of suffering, and in that trembling, it transforms. This quiver of the heart, this deep, resonant empathy that gives rise to the urgent wish, "May you be free from this pain," is the essence of karuna. It is not a separate quality from metta, but its active, courageous, and engaged expression in a world where suffering is an inescapable truth. It is absolutely crucial to distinguish true compassion from its more common and often insidious counterfeit, pity. Pity is a sentiment that arises from a position of separation and superiority. When we pity someone, we look down from a safe and comfortable height at their misfortune below. Pity says, "Oh, you poor thing, I am so glad I am not you." It reinforces the walls of the ego, solidifying our sense of being the fortunate one, the strong one, the one who has it all together. It creates distance. It is an emotion of the self, for the self. Karuna is the precise opposite. It is born from a sense of radical kinship and shared vulnerability. It does not look down from above. It has the courage to kneel beside someone in the mud. It does not say, "I am strong and you are weak." It recognizes that the same potential for suffering that has manifested in them exists within our own heart as well. Pity is a glance from a safe distance. Compassion is the willingness to feel with another, to let their pain resonate within our own being. It is the courageous act of dissolving the boundary between my pain and your pain, and recognizing it simply as pain, a universal human experience that calls for a universal human response. This is why pity is known in the Buddhist tradition as the near enemy of compassion. It looks so similar on the surface, but it is a subtle poison that perpetuates the very illusion of separateness that compassion seeks to heal. True, unshakable compassion is not simply a nice feeling or a moral imperative. It is the natural and logical outcome of deep wisdom. Specifically, it flows directly from the insight into not-self, anatta. As long as we are operating from the deep-seated belief that we are a solid, isolated ego, the suffering of others will always remain, on some level, an abstract problem. We might feel sympathy, we might feel a duty to help, but their pain is fundamentally over there, while our reality is in here. The illusion of separation acts as a kind of spiritual anesthetic, numbing us to the full reality of the world's pain. But when that illusion begins to crack, when we see through direct experience that the boundaries of the self are porous and fabricated, something extraordinary happens. The suffering of another is no longer strictly their problem. It registers within our own field of awareness with a new immediacy and poignancy. It is like when one finger on your hand is accidentally struck by a hammer. The other hand does not look on with pity and think, "Oh, that poor finger." There is no sense of separation. The other hand instinctively rushes to hold and soothe the injured one. Why? Because they are part of the same body, the same unified organism. The insight of anatta reveals that, on the deepest level, all of humanity, all of sentient life, is one body. When one part of that body is in pain, the healthy parts are naturally moved to help, not out of a sense of moral duty, but out of a simple, organic, and irrefutable instinct for wholeness. How then do we cultivate this boundless heart? We do not need to go searching for suffering in order to practice. Life will bring it to our doorstep. Our practice is to learn how to meet the suffering that naturally arises in our lives, the illness of a family member, the distress of a friend, the struggles of a stranger we read about in the news, the pain within our own body and mind, with an open and undefended heart. The meditative practice of karuna often involves bringing a specific being who is suffering to mind. We visualize their pain, not in a morbid or voyeuristic way, but with a gentle, receptive attention. We allow ourselves to feel the echo of that pain in our own heart, and from that place of shared feeling, we radiate the intention, "May you be free from this suffering. May you find peace. May the cause of your suffering be removed." A common and understandable fear arises here. If I truly open myself to the pain of the world, won't I be crushed by it? Won't I drown in an ocean of sorrow? This is a real danger, known today as compassion fatigue or burnout. This is where wisdom must once again come to our aid. Compassion must be balanced by its vital partner, upekkha, or equanimity, which we will explore later. For now, it is enough to understand that wise compassion is not about taking on the entire burden of another's pain as if it were our own. We cannot walk their path for them. The practice is to keep our hearts open and offer our love and support, while recognizing the limits of our own power. We wish for their freedom from suffering, but we do not become attached to the outcome. We offer our help, but we understand that we cannot control the universe. This balance of a tender, open heart and a wise, steady mind is what makes compassion a sustainable, life-giving force rather than a source of exhaustion. Karuna is the motivating power that transforms spiritual practice from a purely internal project of self-purification into a powerful force for good in the world. It is the engine of the bodhisattva, the archetypal enlightened being who, out of boundless compassion, chooses to remain engaged with the world to help all beings find liberation. In the iconography of Asia, this spirit is beautifully embodied in the figure of Avalokiteshvara, or Kwan Theum, the one who hears the cries of the world. Avalokiteshvara is often depicted with 1,000 arms, and in the palm of each hand is an eye. The eyes represent the wisdom to see where suffering exists, and the arms represent the skillful means to reach out and alleviate it. This is the ultimate expression of karuna, a heart that is brave enough to hear the world's cries, a wisdom that is sharp enough to understand their cause, and a will that is strong enough to act. This compassionate heart, brave enough to stay present with pain, is a heart of immense strength. But what happens when this same strong and open heart turns its gaze away from a being who is suffering and toward a being who is experiencing great joy, success, and good fortune? Here, a different, more subtle challenge arises. The challenge of envy and comparison. To meet the happiness of others with the happiness of our own is the next great blossoming of the awakened heart. This is the practice of sympathetic joy, or mudita. Having opened our hearts to feel with those who suffer, the path now presents us with a more subtle, and for many in our competitive world, a far more difficult challenge. It asks us to turn our gaze toward those who are happy, successful, and flourishing, and to feel a genuine, unadulterated joy in their good fortune. This capacity for selfless, sympathetic joy is known as mudita. It is the third of the 4 divine abodes, or Brahmaviharas, and it is the direct and powerful antidote to the corrosive poisons of jealousy, envy, and comparison. If karuna is the heart's ability to weep with those who weep, mudita is the heart's ability to dance with those who dance. It is the practice of multiplying our own potential for happiness by learning to celebrate the happiness of all. In a society that is fundamentally structured around competition, mudita can feel like a radical, almost countercultural act. From a young age, we are graded on a curve, ranked against our peers, and taught that life is a zero-sum game. Another person's success is often perceived, consciously or unconsciously, as our own failure. Their promotion might mean we were overlooked. Their beautiful vacation photos can trigger a feeling of lack in our own lives. Their happy relationship can highlight our own loneliness. This relentless culture of comparison is the breeding ground for envy, which in the Buddhist tradition is seen as a particularly painful form of spiritual poverty. Envy is the painful feeling that arises from wanting what someone else has. It is a state of perpetual lack, a self-inflicted torment that shrinks our world and isolates us from others. The person we envy is often completely unaware of our feelings, happily enjoying their life, while we sit alone, consumed by a bitter fire of our own making. Mudita is the path to freedom from this self-imposed prison. It is born from an abundance mentality, a deep understanding that happiness is not a limited resource that we must all fight over. It is an infinite, generative quality. When another person experiences joy, it does not subtract from the world's total supply of happiness. It adds to it. To practice mudita is to learn how to open our hearts and share in that addition. It is to realize that every time happiness arises anywhere in the world, in any being, it is a victory for us all. Your joy no longer depends solely on the narrow, precarious circumstances of your own personal life. Your heart becomes a vast, celebratory space, capable of delighting in the successes and joys of millions of beings you will never even meet. Your capacity for happiness becomes boundless. Like the other divine abodes, it is important to be aware of mudita's near enemy, a state of mind that looks similar on the surface, but is actually rooted in selfishness. The near enemy of mudita is a kind of vicarious excitement or sycophancy. It is the feeling of being happy about someone's success because we stand to gain from it. For example, we might feel overjoyed when our boss gets a huge promotion, not out of pure joy for her, but because we hope it might lead to a promotion for ourselves. Or we might celebrate the victory of our favorite sports team as if it were our own, because their success bolsters our own ego and sense of identity. This is not true mudita. True mudita is selfless. It finds joy in another's good fortune for their sake alone, with no thought of what it means for me. The cultivation of mudita follows a similar pattern to the other heart practices, a gentle expansion of our capacity for joy. We begin where it is easiest. Bring to mind a person whose happiness naturally brings a smile to your face, perhaps a beloved child opening a gift, a dear friend achieving a lifelong dream, or even a puppy ecstatically chasing a ball. Allow yourself to fully feel their joy. Don't just observe it from a distance. Let its radiant energy permeate your own being. Feel the smile spreading across your own face, the lightness in your own chest. This is the natural, unhindered state of mudita. Soak in this feeling, letting it become familiar. Next, we extend this feeling to a neutral person. Think of a colleague you don't know well who just completed a difficult project successfully, or a neighbor who you see planting a beautiful garden. Instead of the usual indifference, make a conscious effort to connect with their happiness. Reflect on the effort they must have put in, the satisfaction they must be feeling. Silently offer them the wish, "I am so happy for you. May your joy and success continue. May you be free from the fear of losing it." This practice begins to dissolve the walls of indifference that we build around ourselves, connecting us to the simple human triumphs happening all around us every day. The most profound and healing part of the practice is when we intentionally bring to mind someone whose success has been a source of our own envy or resentment. This could be a rival at work, a friend whose life seems more glamorous than ours, or anyone whose good fortune has triggered our own sense of inadequacy. This is the sharp edge of the practice, where the real transformation happens. First, we must mindfully acknowledge the presence of envy. Without judgment, we say to ourselves, here is the feeling of jealousy. It feels like this in my body. It is painful. We meet the poison with kindness. Then, we begin to apply wisdom. We reflect that this person's success did not appear out of a vacuum. They too have worked hard. They too have faced obstacles, and they too have their own private sufferings and insecurities, just as we do. Their outward success is not the whole picture of their life. Then comes the radical act of will. We try, even if it feels artificial at first, to find one small aspect of their success we can genuinely be happy about. Perhaps we can admire their dedication or appreciate the skill they have shown. And from that small seed of appreciation, we gently offer the thought, "May your happiness flourish. May you be worthy of your success. I rejoice in your good fortune." We may have to repeat this many times. It is a powerful act of alchemy, transforming the lead of envy into the gold of joy. Each time we succeed, even for a moment, we reclaim a piece of our own freedom. Finally, we let our mudita become boundless, radiating it out to all beings everywhere. We rejoice in the laughter of children on a playground we will never visit. We celebrate the scientific breakthrough of a researcher on another continent. We feel a shared joy in the beauty of a piece of art or music created by someone long dead. Our heart becomes a global celebration, delighting in every manifestation of happiness, creativity, and well-being. Mudita is a sign of immense spiritual maturity and inner strength. It takes a deep sense of self-worth and security to genuinely celebrate the success of others without feeling diminished. It is the ultimate expression of a mind that has understood the truth of not self, a mind that knows that the happiness of one is the happiness of all. A heart rich in mudita is a joyful heart, a connected heart, and a profoundly peaceful heart. We have now explored three great wings of the awakened heart: metta, the wing of universal love; karuna, the wing of active compassion; and mudita, the wing of sympathetic joy. These three qualities give our spiritual life its lift, its warmth, and its direction. But for these powerful wings to fly steadily and not be thrown off course by the inevitable storms of life by praise and blame, gain and loss, success and failure, they require a fourth and final quality. They need a stabilizing rudder, a balancing force that provides unshakable calm and poise in the face of all things. This final crowning quality of the heart is the profound peace of upekkha, or equanimity. We have explored the radiant, expressive qualities of the awakened heart, the universal love of metta, the trembling empathy of karuna, and the selfless joy of mudita. These are the great wings of our practice, lifting us into states of profound connection and warmth. They are the beautiful flowering of a mind freed from the constraints of self. Yet, for these wings to fly with unwavering strength through the turbulent skies of life, they require a stabilizer. For the heart to love so openly, feel so deeply, and rejoice so freely without becoming exhausted, attached, or overwhelmed, it needs a fourth, crowning quality. This is the quality of upekkha, or equanimity. It is the calm center in the eye of the hurricane, the profound and unshakable peace that arises from deep wisdom. Upekkha is the grounding force that balances the other three divine abodes, ensuring that our love is wise, our compassion is sustainable, and our joy is steady. Of all the heart practices, equanimity is perhaps the most easily misunderstood. To the Western mind, conditioned to value passionate engagement, equanimity can sound like indifference, apathy, or a cold detachment. But this is a complete misreading of its nature. Indifference is the near enemy of equanimity. It is a state of withdrawal, of shutting down the heart out of fear, cynicism, or overwhelm. Indifference says, "I don't care anymore. It's not my problem." It is a defense mechanism rooted in aversion. Upekkha, on the other hand, is a state of radical inclusion and boundless care. It does not come from shutting down, but from opening up so completely that one is no longer thrown off balance by the constant push and pull of personal preference. It is not that you stop caring. It is that you care so deeply and universally that you are not attached to a particular outcome. It is the spaciousness of mind that can hold both joy and sorrow, success and failure, beauty and ugliness, with an even, loving, and unwavering presence. Indifference is born of fear. Equanimity is born of wisdom. The primary arena where we practice equanimity is in our encounter with what the Buddha called the 8 worldly winds. These are the inevitable, impersonal forces of life that are constantly blowing upon us, threatening to throw us off course. They come in 4 pairs of opposites. The first pair is praise and blame. How easily our mood is lifted by a word of praise, and how quickly it is crushed by a word of criticism. We become addicted to approval and terrified of disapproval, giving others immense power over our inner well-being. Equanimity is the ability to hear both praise and blame without becoming inflated by the one or devastated by the other. It is the wisdom to know that our true worth is not determined by the fleeting opinions of others. The second pair is gain and loss. Our lives are a constant dance of acquiring and losing, gaining possessions, friendships, and status, and then losing them to time, change, and circumstance. We cling desperately to our gains and grieve bitterly over our losses. Equanimity is the wisdom that comes from seeing the impermanent nature of all things. It allows us to enjoy our gains with gratitude but without clinging, and to meet our losses with sadness but without despair. It is the peace that comes from understanding the natural, uncontrollable flow of life. The third pair is fame and disrepute. This is the deep human desire to be seen, to be known, to be respected, and the corresponding fear of being ignored, forgotten, or shamed. In our age of social media, this wind blows with hurricane force as people chase likes and followers as a measure of their existence. Equanimity is the inner stability that is not dependent on public opinion. It is the freedom that comes from finding our sense of value within, rather than from the fickle spotlight of external validation. The final and most constant pair is pleasure and pain. This refers to the endless stream of pleasant and unpleasant physical sensations and mental feelings that make up our moment-to-moment experience. A life without equanimity is a frantic chase, constantly running toward pleasure and away from pain. Equanimity is the ability to meet both with a balanced mind. It allows us to experience pleasure without becoming addicted to it, and to endure pain with patience and courage, knowing that it too is impermanent. To live at the mercy of these 8 winds is to be a weather vane, spinning uselessly in every direction. To cultivate equanimity is to become a deep-rooted mountain, which feels the winds blow upon its surface, but whose core remains profoundly, unshakably still. The classic story that illustrates this quality in action is that of the 2 monks and the woman at the river. A senior monk and a junior monk, on their journey, came to a river with a strong current. A young woman stood at the bank, afraid to cross. Seeing her distress, the senior monk, abiding by the spirit of compassion, lifted the woman onto his shoulders, carried her across the swirling water, and set her down gently on the other side. He then continued his journey without a second thought. The junior monk was aghast. Their monastic vows strictly forbade them from touching a woman. He was consumed with judgment and indignation. For hours he walked behind his teacher, replaying the scene in his mind, his anger and confusion growing with every step. Finally, unable to contain himself any longer, he burst out, "Brother, how could you do that? You know we are forbidden to touch a woman. You have broken our vows." The senior monk turned to him with a calm, peaceful gaze and said simply, "Brother, I left that woman back at the riverbank hours ago. Is it possible that you are still carrying her?" In this beautiful story, the senior monk embodies both compassion and equanimity. He acted with karuna to help someone in need, but then, because he was not attached to the action or its implications, he let it go completely. His mind was free. The junior monk, on the other hand, was trapped by his rigid views and judgments. Though he never touched the woman, he carried her mentally for hours, torturing himself with his own reactivity. This is the difference between a mind that is free and a mind that is in bondage to its own preferences. Equanimity is the great protector of the other 3 divine abodes. It ensures our loving kindness does not become selfish attachment. It ensures our compassion does not descend into overwhelming grief. It ensures our sympathetic joy does not become manic excitement. It is the spacious, wise, and loving heart that can hold the entire spectrum of human experience with a tender and unbreakable peace. It is the maturation of love, a love that is so vast and all-encompassing that it has no need to pick and choose, to grasp, or to push away. It simply allows all things to be, meeting them with a steady and compassionate presence. Having now journeyed through the entire Eightfold Path from the wisdom to see our situation clearly, through the ethical conduct to live a life of harmlessness, to the mental discipline required to tame the mind, and finally to the cultivation of a heart that is boundless with love, compassion, joy, and peace, we are left with one final, essential task. We must now explore how to take this profound and transformative journey off the meditation cushion and weave it into the fabric of our complex, demanding, and beautiful modern lives. How do we find our peace, not in a cave, but in the heart of the city? This is the final integration, the art of bringing the monastery into the marketplace. We have traveled an immense distance together on this inner journey. We have followed the Eightfold Path from its very beginning in right view to its culmination in the sublime states of the heart. We have diagnosed the universal ailment of dissatisfaction, uncovered its cause in our own craving, and discovered the radical promise that a cure is possible. We have, in essence, studied the map in minute detail, but a map, no matter how precise, is not the territory. The ultimate purpose of this entire path is not to become an expert on spiritual theory, but to transform the actual, lived reality of our days and nights. The final and most crucial step is to take the practice off the meditation cushion and carry it into the complex, beautiful, and often chaotic world of our everyday lives. The question is no longer what the path is, but how we walk it at the office, in the kitchen, in our relationships, and in our hearts. The great secret of this practice is that the goal is not a destination to be reached in the future. The peace and prosperity we seek are not waiting for us at the end of the path, after we have perfected all 8 steps. True prosperity is discovered in the quality of attention we bring to the journey itself, to this very moment, right now. Our ordinary life, with all its routines and responsibilities, is not an obstacle to our practice. It is the practice itself. It is our monastery, our laboratory, the primary ground for our awakening. We do not need to retreat to a cave in the mountains to find peace. We need to learn how to find it in the heart of the city. Consider the simple, mundane act of washing the dishes. For most of us, this is a chore to be rushed through, while our mind is somewhere else, entirely rehashing a conversation from earlier, planning the next day's work, worrying about a problem. The great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh taught that if you cannot be present while washing the dishes, you will not be able to be present while drinking your tea afterward. You will be thinking of the next thing and the next. Your entire life will pass by in a blur of anticipation and memory, and you will never have truly lived at all. The practice is to simply wash the dishes, to feel the warmth of the water on your hands, to smell the scent of the soap, to feel the smooth, curved surface of the plate, to be fully present for that one simple act. This is not a rehearsal for life. This is life. To be fully present for it is the only real wealth there is. This same principle can be applied to every corner of our modern lives. The stressful morning commute, a time of immense frustration for many, can be transformed into a period of practice. Instead of gripping the steering wheel in anger, we can use that time to be mindful of the body, feeling our hands on the wheel and our back against the seat. We can listen to a Dharma talk, or we can practice metta for the other drivers, recognizing that each car contains a person who, just like us, is simply trying to get somewhere, who, just like us, wants to be happy. The car ceases to be a prison of frustration and becomes a moving meditation hall. At work, sitting in front of a computer, we can set a timer, a gentle bell of mindfulness to sound once an hour. When the bell chimes, we take 3 conscious breaths, release the tension in our shoulders, and bring ourselves back to the present moment before continuing. These small acts of mindful interruption break the hypnotic spell of our busyness and reconnect us with ourselves. This integrated practice also radically transforms our relationship with money and possessions, the very things we once thought were the definition of prosperity. We begin to shift from a mindset of mindless accumulation to one of conscious, skillful use. Before making a purchase, we can pause and ask, what is the true intention behind this desire? Am I seeking to fill an emotional void? Is this something I truly need, or something I merely want? Money itself ceases to be a goal to be pursued for its own sake. It is seen simply as a tool, a form of energy. Like any tool, it can be used skillfully or unskillfully. We use it skillfully to provide for our genuine needs and the needs of those we care for. And most importantly, we learn to use it as a vehicle for the supreme spiritual practice of dana, or generosity. Dana is the active expression of our understanding of not-self and interconnectedness. It is the joy of giving, whether it is our money, our time, our expertise, or simply the gift of a listening ear. The practice of generosity is the direct antidote to the poison of craving and the fear of lack. When we hoard our resources, our mind becomes small, contracted, and fearful. When we give freely, from a place of abundance, our heart expands. We discover the profound truth that our own happiness is deeply intertwined with the happiness of others. We find that the more we give, the richer we feel. This is the true meaning of infinite prosperity, a heart so full of contentment and goodwill that it constantly overflows, enriching the world around it. Finally, integrating the path means letting go of the fantasy that a spiritual life is a life free from problems. This is a childish dream. The first arrows of life will never stop flying. The stock market will crash. People we love will get sick. Relationships will end. We will face disappointment and injustice. The goal of the path is not to create a life devoid of storms. The goal is to become a deep-rooted, unshakable mountain that is not destroyed by the storms. The practice is about learning how to access the profound silence and stillness that exists deep within us, even when the surface of our life is turbulent. Peace is not the absence of noise, but the ability of the heart to remain quiet in the midst of the noise. The monastery we seek is not a building made of stone and wood. It is a sanctuary we build in our own heart through the patient, dedicated practice of awareness and love. This is the ultimate fruition of the path. There is no longer a separation between meditation time and the rest of my life. Every breath is a meditation. Every step is an opportunity for mindfulness. Every conversation is a chance to practice kindness. Every challenge is a lesson in wisdom. The mundane becomes sacred. The search for a distant future prosperity is abandoned, replaced by the discovery of the boundless richness of this very moment. We set out on this journey looking for a way to raise our frequency and attract abundance, and we have discovered something far more profound. That the highest frequency is the silent, peaceful mind, and the greatest abundance is the freedom of a loving and liberated heart. We began this journey together in a high-rise apartment, looking out over a city of glittering lights, with a feeling of profound and nameless emptiness. We started with a search for prosperity in a world of things, and a desire to raise our frequency to attract a better life. We have traveled far since that first moment. We have dared to question the very meaning of our search, redefining frequency not as a signal we send out, but as the quality of our own awareness, and redefining prosperity not as what we accumulate, but as the unshakable peace we can cultivate within. We walked through the Buddha's timeless diagnosis, seeing the subtle dissatisfaction, the dukkha, that underlies so much of our modern striving. We found its source not in our circumstances, but in the burning thirst of craving tanha within our own hearts. And then, in the darkness, we were shown a light, the promise that this thirst can be quenched, and a clear, practical map to that liberation, the Noble Eightfold Path. We have explored this path together, learning to ground ourselves in ethical living, to steady our minds through discipline, and to open our hearts to a love so vast it excludes no one. The ultimate truth we have uncovered is a simple one. The infinite abundance we were seeking was never out there to be attracted. It has been here all along, obscured by the clouds of our own confusion. The peace we long for is not a calm, far-off destination where all our problems are solved. It is the deep, unwavering stillness we learn to access in the very heart of the storm. The highest frequency is not a vibration that brings us more things, but the silent, radiant clarity of a mind that needs nothing. True wealth is not having everything you want. It is the radical, liberating realization that in this present moment, in this very breath, you are already complete. It is the freedom from the chase. This is not an ending, it is a beginning. You do not need to wait for a special circumstance to start walking this path. You do not need a monastery, a guru, or any external permission. The tools for your own liberation are already in your possession. They are as close as your own body, as immediate as your own breath. The anchor of the present moment is always available to you, a refuge from the storms of thought. The choice to be kind to yourself and to others is available in every interaction. The journey of 1,000 miles begins, always, with a single step. And that step, that first movement toward true prosperity and peace, is as simple, as profound, and as close as your very next conscious breath. Take it now and begin.